Okay.
I want to welcome you all and the public to a board meeting, and I'm convening it for the purposes of a consent agenda that we need to look at and approve. It's June 16th, 2026. First of all, I do want to excuse our board president, Nate Salazar. He was married last Saturday, and I think they are off the grid in Montana somewhere. And then I would also like to recognize that board member Romano, she is attending through Zoom. Thank you for being here for our board retreat and this board meeting, Annie. And then I also received an email from Nicole Palmer saying that she would be attending as a SLCSD representative, but I don't see her.
She texted me and I told her.
Okay, you told her we were okay. All right, okay. So what we'll do is we will move forward on the agenda, and I have asked Superintendent Grant if she will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And then I guess I should note that I will be leading the meeting this evening in the board retreat. I'm Brian Jensen, the board vice president. We will proceed with the consent agenda, and then when we have approved that, we will move into a board retreat. And I would note that the board retreat will be available through audio, but there won't be a video version of that for people that may be listening in, so that they have that clarification. All right. I have had a request from two board members to pull item 4, Safe School Case number 26-118 off the consent agenda and postpone discussion of this item until our board meeting in July. Given that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda excluding item 1B4.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as posted, except for item number 1B4, Safe Schools Case number 26-118, which will be postponed to our July 14th, 2026 meeting.
Thank you.
2B4, right?
What?
No.
I second.
Oh,
Yep. Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll now vote on that, and I will begin with Board Member Longwell.
Amanda Longwell, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Annie Romano, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes. That motion has been unanimously approved. All right, having taken care of the consent agenda and its approval, we will now move into our board retreat. And I asked Helen to put together, well, she didn't put it together. I put together an agenda for our board retreat this evening. You should have a copy of that. I'm going to hold it up. And she said that she was emailing one to you, Annie, so I hope that you have that. It says at the top of it, Agenda 6/16/26. Do you all have that? Okay. Okay, we've had our pledge, we've had the consent agenda, but I just wanted to reserve some time if there are any announcements that you need to make. The two announcements that I thought were important was, okay, our next board meeting is July 14th. We will only be having one board meeting in July. We'll take care of any district business at that time, board business as well. And then there will be one board meeting in August 4th. And that's following our norm where we meet on the first Tuesday of every month. We did detract from our board norm for July because that was right around the 4th of July weekend. Do any of you have anything else that we need to be aware of? Bryce?
This could wait, but I think it's important
Okay.
just to give folks an update. We had our USBA Board of Directors meeting on the 5th. I know one of the things we talked about in the our last board meeting
Right.
is the direction that USBA would take with membership in NSBA. It sounds like there is a desire to pause any further conversation about leaving NSBA. So for the time being, USBA plans status quo. Yeah.
Did they give any indication when they're going to revisit it, or is it just
Well, that's a great question.
revisiting the conversation?
Yeah, no planned, nothing planned to further the conversation for now. We did have a fairly lengthy conversation around the benefits or the reservations of continuing on, and it seemed like a majority of the board of directors preferred to stay. But yeah, as of now, no date planned for further conversation. So it could come up again, but it doesn't seem like there's a desire to push forward with that conversation.
I would, and maybe now's not the time, but it would be curious to know what the reservations are.
Yep, I'm happy to, I can share those a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you for that update. And then I also know that we had our delegate and everything went as planned there. Okay. Because we're not going to be having board member reports. This is just our board retreat, but I appreciate that update on NSBA. Is there anything else?
I do have to say that East High lacrosse has gone to nationals. I received a notice that they're up in the chain. I have to look at my text and stuff, but they're kicking butt. So FYI.
Well, that's exciting. I did not see that. I did not. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so what I thought would be good was to just look at what we're going to be doing in our board retreat. Okay, and what I've tried to do, and this will be reflected a little bit later when we get into board meeting structure, but what I've tried to do is list a time for the different activities that we'll be doing. So the icebreaker, 4:15, and we'll be doing that for 30 minutes. We're a couple of minutes late. We got started a couple of minutes late. Then at 4:45, we will go to board norms. We've allocated an hour for that. After we have looked at board norms, and I'm not going to go through the bullet points then, but those bullet points will kind of direct our conversation when we get to those different activities. Then the dinner and board evaluation will begin at 5:45. So my hope is that as we're going through this, we'll keep to this time frame. I've spoken to Richard Stoll a couple of hours ago. He's planning to be here at, well, I'm sure he'll be here a little before 5:45, but I want it to be that we're able to do that when he's here so that he can, I mean, he's coming from Spanish Fork or whatever, but okay. That has been allocated for 45 minutes. So at 6:30 p.m., we'll then look at board meeting structure, allocated 45 minutes for that. Then if you turn it over on the back, it shows you that Okay, the board goes 7:15, and then we'll be ending our meeting at 8 p.m. As you look at this, and I would just give this quick preface before we move into that icebreaker, and thank you, Charlotte, for so graciously preparing for that. When we look at what's on this retreat, this reflects what we got back from board members when you were asked 2 board meetings ago to give us your top 4 requests. There were other requests that came up, but these, the board norms, the evaluation, board meeting structure, board goals, those were the 4 that had the most votes. So that's how we determined the agenda. Okay, Charlotte.
All right. So this icebreaker is meant to get the juices flowing, for our work ahead.
Right.
I need you to pair up. We need to get in pairs. Now, is Annie available for this part?
Yeah, I'm here. I just went off camera so you don't have to see me eating and stuff.
Okay. Is there a way someone can talk with Annie, just like with a, I don't know.
I might have to talk by phone.
Oh, by phone?
Yeah, okay.
So, but I
Okay.
want you to pair up with somebody that you don't normally interact with, that you're not talking with a lot. So
Okay.
in order to do, this is team building and listening. We're going to be doing some listening to our partner, and then taking notes and jotting down some key notes from your conversations and from what you hear your partner say on these sticky notes, okay? So while there are 3-minute talks.
Okay.
And the talks are, what you will be answering is, the whole idea of this, okay. Thank you. So the goal of this is to understand exactly what each of us needs from this team to do our best work next year. Okay?
Great.
So what each of us needs from this team, this governance team, right, to do our best work next year. And so our superintendent and business administrator are participating as well. But I was thinking that, we have superintendent, business administrator, board leadership, and board members. So
Okay.
think of it in those categories. And what do we need from this team to do our best work next year? And you can think of it, what do you need from board leadership? What do you need from the superintendent? What do you need from, I don't know what comes up in your discussion. But you get to speak for 3 minutes straight.
Okay.
And while your partner listens, and then I will keep time, okay? So, but I want you to think about, when you're thinking about what you need, keep the focus on operational or communication needs. Okay, so for example, this is an example. Rachel shares that she needs 48 hours, at least 48 hours, to digest data before voting. Okay? I mean, that's just an example. Or Jamal feels most respected when he receives clear, straight answers rather than corporate speak from colleagues. Things like that. So think about your role as what your individual roles are. Board members have a governing role, right? Superintendent and business administrator have a different goal. I mean, a different role. Sorry, within our district. So we need to be thinking about that. So, and I just want you all to know that this, when I came up with an idea, I mean, I thought about an icebreaker activity or a team building activity. It wasn't with any one individual in mind or individuals. It was about the team. And it was about our district culture and our governance culture. And how can we improve this for next year? That's all I was thinking. And I meant to bring you lemon candies because, you know, some people were a little sour on this idea of icebreaker. So I wanted to make lemonade out of lemons, but I left them at home. I'll bring them to the next meeting, okay?
Okay.
All right. Okay, so let's
So
find-
Charlotte, if you're saying that we've got to divide up.
Yeah.
I think that that's good that you're pairing someone with someone that you don't talk to as much.
Yeah.
Okay, I talk to Alan and Liz a lot
Oh,
because
yeah.
of, you know, that board leadership. I'm happy to talk to them, but if someone would like to talk to them, that's good.
Thank you for recognizing that. I
okay.
think, yes, you do speak with them quite frequently as board leadership. So.
Bryce, is there someone you would like to speak with? Oh, you're with Liz, okay.
Okay.
I'll take Brian.
Okay, we don't
So,
talk that
Annie-
much. Okay.
Annie and
Annie's calling
Alan?
me.
Oh, Annie's calling Ashley.
So,
Because I talk to Alan the most.
so I'll
Okay,
pair
all
with
right.
you, Charlotte.
Well, I'm not pairing.
Oh,
Oh,
yes,
but
you are.
we're going to need you to because we have. Okay, well, so you and Alan could do it because
Okay, Alan.
Alan's a good timekeeper while you're talking.
It's done.
You want to keep time?
Okay, so are you saying now, Charlotte,
Okay.
that we, like, I'm going to talk to Amanda for 3 minutes and then she's going to talk to me? Is that what you're telling us to do?
So find partner A and then partner B.
And then what's the step after this, Charlotte?
The step after this is, so listen to this. Partner A speaks for 3 minutes straight, while partner B listens deeply. And then a timer will ring, and then switch roles, like listen actively. How about that? And then switch roles for another 3 minutes, okay? What I do want you to write down, everyone will write down 2 or 3 takeaways from that you heard from your partner about what they need, okay? And then, after that, we'll have a whole group reflection, but I want everybody to bring when we're done with the 2 conversations, you'll bring me your sticky notes and I'll put them up on the board. Okay, and I'm going to put them up underneath the various roles. There's 4, right? 4 roles. I'll write it out later, okay? All right. It would be easier to facilitate this without me.
I'll start the timer. So
Okay.
Are we ready?
Thank you,
So
Charlotte,
3
for doing that.
minutes.
Okay.
Starting now.
What do you need most from your colleagues to feel supported, respected, and effective in your role on this team?
So supported, what were they again?
Expected.
Respected?
Supported, respected, and effective.
Okay, so there's 3
Or
things.
effective, yeah.
Okay. All right, do you want to go?
Do you want to go first or me?
You can go first.
All right.
Yes, because it seems like, okay, what I got out of what she was saying was, what do we need from our colleagues to do our best work next year? And then, given we have a governing role, and how we approve our governance culture, is little bits I'm taking from this. So it's partly in my takeaway, not only how we function as board members, but also what we are seeking to, in the governance role, what we are seeking from our main team leads, our executive directors, and what they're communicating or their outcomes and how they're accomplishing them.
I need to present $5 million worth of cuts, but I can't really wait.
Board member supported, reflective, effective, like collaboration. I think it's meaningfully listening from all members of the board.
Okay.
Meaningfully respecting each person's input and hearing each person's input and figuring out how to support the priorities of every single individual while we juggle our own priorities. So it's actually a team effort as we're trying to help our district succeed as a whole. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a lot of words, sorry. And if you ask me to repeat it, I probably forget.
Adjust the process in January. Board.
No, I'm writing the words. Then I'll also do mine. So I'll do it at the same time. I have the capacity to do that.
20 seconds.
20 seconds.
Getting the opportunity to provide input and ensure
I think we need,
the majority of the
I think it helps sometimes things get, hey, I would like this. Sometimes we don't always.
preference. So we are truly representing what the board is wanting in any initiative. But then when we're looking at our district executive departments, we need to make sure that
Let's do 30 more seconds, okay? 30 more seconds.
quality communication not only up to us, but to all departments below them, so that everyone in the district is feeling seen, heard, and their input is seen as valuable and sought as valued in that process of
30 more seconds.
Oh, okay. You have 30 more.
So wrap it up.
So those are kind of.
what would be beneficial next steps for the district. Does that make sense? Okay. I guess.
All right, ready to switch?
They only gave me 30 minutes. So.
Yes. That's a fast 3 minutes. Quit putting it on speed.
Yeah, that is. That went fast.
Not fast forward 3
Leading
minutes.
up to the efficiency discussion later, that 3 minutes will actually be.
That's right. Yes. it is.
Okay, it's time to switch. Now partner B will talk about what they need from their colleagues to do their best work. Ready?
Starts now.
Go.
I mean, I guess my mirror some of what you're saying, but the way that I would look at it would be that our board assumes the best from each other.
So the preference is that the board assumes the best.
The best intentions of each board member. And what I mean by that is that we trust each other. We, and when I say trust, I mean, we're all going to have different priorities, but you're trusting that each board member has the best intentions in seeing that their priorities are met as well as the other board members' priorities. I think that I'm trying to figure out how to put this.
Right, it's kind of short.
Just also expands from.
I think that it's important that we talk to each other
That's hilarious.
offline. So if you think, well, this board member, they're driving whatever their agenda is, call them and say, help me understand what it is you're trying to do.
So what I'm putting is important to talk to other board members to better understand their intentions.
Right, instead of, you know how sometimes people will just say, well, they're doing this, this, and this, but then they never ask them. Or
So we'll say before assuming.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really important thing for the board with district leadership, that we assume the best from them, that we're not thinking that they're trying to direct the board. Does that make sense?
Yeah, presume that everybody's primary intention is to help everything be successful versus
That's our timer.
But that was 3
Right.
causing harm.
Okay, 30 more seconds to wrap it up. 30 more seconds to wrap up.
Are we going to do more with our partner? Or
No,
Flush out.
no, because you guys only gave me 30 minutes.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
To flush out experiences that cloud that
Yeah.
ability to trust that.
Yeah, because, so like
And then we
something
stick these
happens
up.
and then,
Is that true?
Hand them
talked
to
about-
me first. Well,
'Cause
actually,
I wrote all mine on one page, but they're actually.
Make sure they're on
different sections.
Yeah,
one idea on one idea on another.
get what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Sorry, I
it's
wasn't clear
okay.
about that.
Okay.
Juggling act.
We had
That was your 30.
Okay.
Okay, let me see if I get my notes right. So, important to talk offline.
All right, we need to wrap it up.
Presume that they are well-intended in their efforts instead of presuming otherwise.
Right, yeah. Okay.
And correct me if I missed
Yeah,
anything.
yes, we, yeah.
You know, you could just read them to me and I could write them up here.
That is probably better, because you
Yeah,
probably
that's-
won't be able to read my writing.
Okay. We can do that.
And I'm over here doing the best penmanship I've done in a long time.
She can read yours.
Which still might not be.
I won't make her suffer through mine.
Is it okay if I've started doing them this way, that I just go stick them up?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, in that 3 minutes, we're supposed to break down all 4?
All 4. No, 2 more.
I was like, we did not succeed.
No, you weren't supposed to do that.
But we're able to, like, because we.
We can only do so much in 30 minutes. Okay. So if you want to put the sticky notes up there, like I originally asked you, you can. But put it under, or just give them to me and I can put them under the correct.
Category?
Yeah. Or you can put it under the correct, why don't you just do it?
Okay.
Okay, so we'll come up and write something.
No.
You have more dry erase?
You know what? Just put it on a sticky note if you want.
Okay,
please.
all
Let's
right,
just
so I'm
stick
going to
the
stick it on a
original
sticky note, okay?
plan. Yeah, and it might overlap.
Yeah, I'll emphasize this bit that breaks out. Is there a tape in here?
Tape?
Yeah.
I can go grab some. I'll go grab some. Oh, sorry, I should have told you to jot your one idea on a piece. Sorry.
It's okay.
And it's okay, I'll just write it on here.
You sure?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, and if you want to, you can walk around and read the answers. Just kind of look at them. And we're just going to have a small whole group reflection.
I don't know where the. It's supposed to
You,
go
who do you need it from?
Well. for
You have
all of
three.
us and
Let's
some
see.
of us.
Well, if you could, sorry, put your takeaways on a separate, sorry, you did that so beautifully.
You know what, I don't.
Do you want me to write it? So I can go grab paper, tape, that's what I meant.
There you go.
Okay.
You need tape? Oh, you have tape.
No, I need.
Something for everybody. Okay. There. I can figure this out, Charlotte, we got it.
Here, everybody is like at the top, is that what you're saying?
Uh-huh, don't you think that,
Yeah, and that one changed.
is that where that went?
I don't care. There you go.
Use what we have. Oh, I think we got it, thank you. I MacGyvered a solution.
Oh, woo! Are they all up, does for everybody?
Uh-huh, those are the for everybody ones.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Helpful until they put them in our district.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Charlotte, I would say, because we started this late,
Wrap it up.
well, no, let's do, because we were 7 minutes into your time, so
Okay.
how about 5 minutes? Let's see if we can
Okay.
take 5 minutes.
Well, first I just want to see if we have any common themes here. We've got yeah, I actually think this might be right here. Okay.
Did the group notice some things?
Yeah, did you notice any common themes?
Well, I did. I mean, communication seemed to be across the board there.
Yeah.
I agree.
Communication was the.
So I'm just going to share this while you're looking, Charlotte, because it's not, you've been trying to run it and then work with Alan and all of that, but, okay, so for me, when it's communication with the board, I guess sometimes it seems like it would be helpful that if I have a question, instead of assuming something from the board member, I should call them and say, okay, am I understanding this correctly? Is this, instead of thinking, okay, this is what I think they're trying to do, or I should call them and see, okay, what, and then when it comes to board leadership, the thing that I was getting out of that when I saw it is, well, it's set direct communication, so you guys help me understand what that would be, because I do try to call you, or Nate and I will try and call you if it's something that's urgent, but then we try to, send out the updates. Is there something more that I or Nate needs to be aware of?
I didn't write it, but I would say a good example is the safe schools thing. There wasn't any clarity as to what the procedure would be for this, and then you saw my email where I was like, how are we
going to do
handling
that?
this?
Yeah.
And Christina was like, it was communicated out, but it didn't, unless I overlooked it, it didn't get communicated out to all of us to know how we were proceeding into this meeting. So that would be a communication piece that would be very helpful.
And I don't want to get into like specific things. We don't have time to do that
Okay.
with all of these, but I think you're right. If we make assumptions, my history teacher, my AP US history teacher told me, you make an A out of you and me. Yeah, like so don't make assumptions. We need to stop, we need to communicate more. It's tricky because we're not supposed to deliberate unless we're in a public meeting. But if we're just trying to understand one another, we could do a better job at trying to say, do I understand this correctly? Is this what you would like? Or, I don't know.
Charlotte,
Any other themes?
I just want, well,
Oh.
maybe it's going too deep into the weeds. I was just going to say, in my perception of kind of similar to Brian, like communication is a big theme across these four different areas. And one thing I shared with the superintendent is that I actually think our communication issues are what are contributing to so many other things. I think it's the big umbrella is communication, and all these other things are kind of falling under. So
Okay.
hopefully sometime in the future we can maybe talk about those a little bit more. but in my 5 years on the board, I think communication is what is stalling a lot of the progress or creating a lot of the barriers that we have.
Any other comments about, did you have any surprises that you heard from your partner? Was anything particularly helpful that you heard from your partner?
I will just say, one of the comments that was said, it wasn't necessarily new, but it's a good thing to contemplate, is presume the best before presuming the worst. Give a chance, whether it's our fellow board members or district personnel, that good intentions were meant before assuming that bad intentions were, so that it doesn't cause and this is me inserting more words, a caustic environment, so to speak.
Yeah. Assume positive intent. So that's one place where we can assume, is just that we all want to do well. We all want to do good work. I think that's why we're here. And if we don't trust, I think that is an underlying thing as well. You know, it doesn't mean that we don't make mistakes, right? All of us make mistakes, but I think we are all here for the common reason that we love public education and we want our students in our district to have access to a high quality education and positive outcomes. And that's what we should be unified around. Is there anything else? I found something very helpful from my partner, Alan, and specific. It was about needing communication and feedback from the board around budgetary things. So we are, you know, that we are facing budget cuts and we have a deficit and there are going to be hard decisions to make. And so he said we need to communicate about that beforehand, you know. And he's looking for the best ways to do that. Are you seeking some input from us right now on the best ways to get input? He said either through small meetings or phone calls.
Yeah, I mean, some of our communication challenge has to do with a public meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you have to go out of your way to find out how can I keep, not violate the open public meetings, but also make sure everybody has all the information that they need. So when a decision is asked for, everyone kind of feels comfortable with the decision. They understand what went behind the recommendation. And so, I mean, it's a challenge. I don't want to say there's an easy answer, but those are the things we need to be looking at of how can we open those channels of communication and still be, not deliberating outside of the public meeting.
True, but we also, just to throw back, we talked about in the motion to approve, doing a study session to figure out how to fulfill the needs for each person in that ultimate approval. But we could also consider having that just be a regular annual study session where we are delving into the budget outside of a very rushed discussion. We obviously have the finance committee, we all have these other elements, but what fleshed out of that budget approval discussions was everybody needs to feel comfortable with it, period. And so that may be a way that we flesh out any pauses or consternations, and we do that earlier than later, so we can kind of work through it.
I think probably additional just one-on-one phone calls and conversations. Because I think we've had a lot of conversations this year with Finance Committee, but then that excludes the other half of the board. So, how do I, pick up the phone and say, hey, here's some things I'm thinking about. some of the trick is, then that's 7 phone calls you're making, and if each phone call is, 20, 30 minutes. But, so it's prioritizing what are the things we need to have those conversations on and make the time to have them.
And we know as a finance committee, we know that this was an inevitable reality that's leading into other discussions. So it's bringing a very heavy reality to that conversation. So it's being forthcoming, it's being honest, it's a harsh reality so that we can all make important decisions relevant to that problem.
And it's just saying with any of our big decisions, not just budget, but anyone's, how do we make sure everybody has all the information they need? And I think it may look different depending on the situation, but we just need to be flexible, and we need to make sure we're making efforts to make sure, hey, have I communicated out the information or have I at least reached out to all board members to say, hey, here's, in 2 months, we're looking at doing this. Here's kind of some thoughts. What information more do you need so that when we get to the decision-making time, everybody feels.
And that's not isolated to you and Dr. Grant. That's relevant to every single thing brought to the board, because some individuals are stronger in providing very meaningful information to us that regards us in our positions and as collaborators and partners in this process. And there's other times the information that comes, I'll be blunt, it's very
Higher
demeaning.
level.
Like very superficial and not really a collaborative approach in that information share as we're trying to tackle those conversations. So if like
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Sorry, I do think maybe this is starting to go into the board norms, so maybe this will be covered later, but I do think that communication barrier for committees could be breached by doing more memos, just so everyone's on the same page, and then they'll know the information that they have to reach out to Alan for.
Yes. This is priming us for the board norms and for, our board meeting protocols and that type of thing. So thank you. I'm glad you all were, I know it wasn't a lot of time, but was there any other?
I don't know if Amanda finished her.
Oh.
Did you?
It was roughly what I stated, but ultimately, like, ensuring that it's not only the board's responsibility to ensure that we're meaningfully participating in the process, and Dr. Grant and Alan's responsibility to ensure they're providing us with meaningful information, but every single individual that is presenting to the board, which is also presenting to the community, and thank you, Bryce, that they are presenting in a way that they're educating, and even if the board knows it, they're educating every single individual that's listening to those discussions, presuming they've never heard it before, so that it becomes a very in-depth, collaborative, meaningful conversation. Because if without that, it really comes across where I, as a board member, feel like the information wasn't forthcoming, and the community feels like the information is not accurate or forthcoming or clear, and that creates the distrust, even though that wasn't the intention. So those were my thoughts on like the whole communication piece in relation to this whole exercise.
Okay.
Thank you, Charlotte. Okay, we've gone 10 minutes over, but we've got 45 minutes now when we would be looking at our board norms. That was a great segue into that. What I had Helen do, with the help of, Superintendent Grant, you should have a board handbook subcommittee consideration of board norms. Okay, this was something that we received, earlier This was, I mean, we talked about our board norms back in August of last year. Then the subcommittee looked at it. Nate gave you, I think it was in the last meeting, a sheet with Nate's kind of distilled versions of the board norms. I've got those if people want to look at those as well, but I thought that this was probably a good way to kind of go back and reflect on our board norms. What I put under that board norms heading was, okay, a review of last year's identified board norms, you know, how the implementation has gone, what the progress is, then new norms and norms for consideration. And then that third bullet point, those were just, like I have heard these three suggested. Maybe there are others that people want to bring, but okay, 3 to agree, a second study session, subcommittee meeting schedules. Those would be other things that we could look at after we've looked at the board norms we agreed to. Charlotte?
I just wanted to point out that we are talking about board meeting structure at 6:30 PM.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So if we have board norms that are more about meeting structure, we should save that
Okay.
for later, do you think?
Well, to me, there are two ways to look at meeting structure. There's the actual board meeting, and how are we all looking at how the board meeting is to be conducted, how it's operated. Do we want to look at specifics on how to shorten the board meetings? Or I guess another way to put that would be, and I don't want it to be that we're saying that we're not efficient, but how can we get this accomplished? Yeah, to be more efficient, that sort of thing. When you're talking about other meetings, to me, that's kind of a board norm where you've got to decide as a board, do we think that subcommittees should be meeting more than what has been agreed upon in the past? Because then you're changing, to me, the board norm. Should you, but you guys, I am one person. You are all board members, and you need to direct this conversation too as to where you think we should talk about that. But I think that we do need to talk about it, because I am hearing from, well, Charlotte and Annie, you're on the policy subcommittee, and we're now planning additional subcommittee policy meetings. And part of that is due to, okay, the legislature kind of dictates policies that we're going to have to make revisions to statutorily meet the legislative requirements. But then, are those emergency, or do you now say, well, yeah, we're going to schedule, because the way that it has been in the past for the subcommittee is, and Bryce, you were on that committee for, it was like every other month, that we were meeting. Well, now it's turning into every month, and it's also turning into, well, maybe we'll have 2 this month, or to me, that's something that the board needs to talk about, to decide how they feel about that in general. No, I'm talking about subcommittee meetings. And I have heard from Ashley that the financial subcommittee is now considering having additional meetings and that sort of a thing. So to me, that's a norm sort of a thing.
I mean, there's a board norm and there's a subcommittee norm, in my opinion. And
Okay.
Subcommittees can determine what's necessary for their subcommittee work, whereas we have the whole like the entirety of the board and how we function as a board norm. Does that make sense? So in my opinion, they're separate. Like the committees determine how they want to function as long as they're getting their work done. All the work done needing to be done. And then the board is functioning as entirety as we are functioning within these board meetings and how we're functioning with each other. That's my take on it.
Okay, Ashley.
I was just going to say, I think that's what Brian is trying to say, is that we don't have agreements about what the scope of work is supposed to be, and that more work is being added. And then additionally, we're reporting on that work, but then we find that people still don't know what we've done or have a lot of questions about it, even though we're saying it in pretty much every single meeting. So I think the question is, what is the board expecting that the policy subcommittee achieve? And what is the board expecting the finance committee achieve? Because it's our responsibility to bring it back to everybody.
True, and that kind of goes into that board meeting structure piece that was being talked about is, and I've talked about this piece, is instead of having the subcommittee reports happen organically or at the end of the meeting, is it picking up? Because you've got it super loud for now. Instead of having it happen organically at the end of the meeting when everybody's kind of tuned out. I've seen other school boards where they actually integrate that in part of their board meetings. So it's an intentional conversation, and you've got it ingrained into the meeting as this is there, but there might have not have been a meeting, so is there a discussion? If there is not, we move on. But it's always intentionally there that is being reviewed.
And I appreciate that, and I think, and part of this is, the handouts that you got, I will acknowledge, they were late in coming, but part of that is because our board president has been gone, and trying to gather this information and get it out to you has not, you didn't get it, in, I guess I would say a timely fashion. But if you were to look at, because there's another handout that I asked Ashley to help me put together, I was trying to coordinate some of this stuff with Nate, and he was out of town, and I was out of town. But you will see there are some suggestions in the meeting structure that would accommodate some of that you're talking about, Amanda. So I think that is something that we should talk about when we get to the board meeting, the actual board meeting structure. How are we going to revise or improve our actual board meetings? Okay. So back to this board norms. If you, and maybe what I'll do is, because I have copies of these as well, in case you don't have the ones that Nate handed out before, but here's, Bryce, maybe you can pass those out, because you're going to be more familiar with those. Those are what came recently. But to me, it's really helpful to have this one from the handbook committee because it gives a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you look at that first board norm sheet that Nate handed out 2 meetings ago, okay, he's saying action items must be discussed or voted on separately, individually, bulk action. Anyway, he says that that's implemented. Then we go down and we look at number 2. If an item has zero intention or need for an action, put it on the report agenda, not on the discussion agenda. And then there's more explanation there.
And I would say really quick, I'm going to interject there, that is not being consistently applied.
Okay, and those are the things that I want for us to talk about, okay? Then as you go down, we don't have notation whether it's been implemented or not, or whether it's being effectively taken care of. So maybe this sheet, the board norms with the yellow highlights, can kind of direct us. But then if you want the policy board handbook subcommittee's reflection on it, what you can do is you can go over and you can see where the subcommittee in blue was responding to action items. Okay, that first one that we just did, action items must be discussed or voted on separately. Okay, subcommittee recommendation. It's saying both board policy B2, school board meetings, and the board handbook include the following statement. Other than the consent agenda, each motion should be limited to one idea or issue. In the board policy, that statement is on page 3 in the section entitled procedural. Okay, it's giving you references so that you can see how to accomplish that first board norm if you're doing it through the lens of the handbook. Okay? Do we need to talk about that one more? Do people feel like we are...
I'm sorry, which one?
Okay, the first one.
Action items? Oh,
Are
this
you
one.
wanting to look at
Yeah.
number 1 first?
Look at number 1 on this sheet, and Annie,
Norms?
can you see it?
I think we're generally doing good there.
I have it pulled up.
Okay, so Amanda thinks we're doing all right on that one. Ashley, I saw you nod. Okay.
Yeah.
Charlotte, she thinks we're good
Good.
there. Okay. I think we're doing pretty well there. Bryce had to step out for a minute. I think that we can go to the next one.
Okay,
Okay?
great.
If an item has zero intention or need for an action, put it on the report agenda, not on the discussion agenda. The outcome of the discussion from the report may lead to a need for board action that would move to the next meeting's discussion agenda for the next round of discussions and potential action. Implement it. Okay?
Yeah, it's part of our, we want 3 hearings.
Yeah.
Right?
But we also, like, discussions, in my opinion, meant to have that discussion and go to action. But if it's landing on the discussion agenda with no intention for action, it's very misleading. And obviously, there's notations in the paperwork, we don't need you to do any action. Okay, well, why is it on the discussion agenda? We can still discuss it on the report agenda. The report agenda, there is zero intention or ability to go to action. So if there is a potential that they are, like, you can go to action and make that clarity in the memo, if that's why it's there. But otherwise, keep those separate. If there's zero intention, this is purely a quote-unquote discussion
Informational.
item, an information item, we're going to talk through it, there's not an action point at this point. Don't put it on discussion agenda. Discussion is meant for action in all of my work. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, a discussion doesn't necessarily mean there will be a vote on the action agenda, but we get into situations where people want to offer direction from reports, which is not common and therefore unpredictable for the public. So the idea it's on the discussion agenda doesn't mean it will move to the action agenda where a vote will take place, but it does mean that we can direct a future study session, ask Alan, for example, for a follow-up report on something, whereas reports are meant to be standalone reports without follow-up actions. And so I think it's actually, I think we're doing, I understand what you mean, because sometimes it is very frustrating that there's certain instances where something is meant to be on the discussion agenda, like a land trust training, for example, or a financial training, that it has to be placed there even though the action is us doing it. So I think it's just, agree to disagree about verbiage, and that the intent of what I think you've meant is clear, which is sometimes it's very frustrating when things are on there and it's not clear why. And I think many of those things have moved to reports or memos preferably.
And I'm grateful for that clarity. I think it would be helpful, given we're given a lot of information on a continual basis, that if there's some kind of I know there's all sorts of disclaimers all over this document now. You're welcome. That some kind of a reminder that in that discussion piece, that even though there's not an expectation for an action to occur, there can be direction. An action is way more official and expects the actual outcome, where the direction doesn't have as much weight. But it's still something that is helpful to provide that clarity, especially as we're having this turnover with our board and we're getting ready to go through another election cycle, that we're not having to continually re-educate the new individuals that come in.
Well, we always
Very
will.
helpful.
And I would just clarify, they do have equivalent weight. Anytime a direction is given, it would require unanimous consent for that direction to happen. It is an action. It's just disagreement about kind of the verbiage of what each thing means, but direction is just as important as a vote, if not more, because it has to be even more clear. You know, that's one of the reasons why you'd prefer to vote on something.
I think it votes concretely, you're going to do this, period.
And that's what board direction is too. So for example, if we were in a meeting and we had something on the discussion agenda that we had to vote on, the meeting chair certainly would be entitled under all procedures to say, is there any objection to the superintendent moving forward with such and such and such action? And no one said no. That now is the decision that was made, even though we didn't all go around and vote on it. There's a lot of ways that decisions can get made, and direction is one of them. A vote on the action agenda is another. And, you know, there.
And see, I think that that's a really helpful clarification, because one of the things that I think that we may find when we get to the actual business meet, or the meeting structure, that's an efficient way to run a meeting sometimes, instead of doing a separate roll call vote for everything. Okay, so there's been a conversation, and the board in that conversation has agreed, oh yeah, you know, that makes sense. So then the chair says, okay, we're now directing the superintendent to do da, 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 da. And if there's no negative response, that direction is given.
Yeah, and I think that's the piece, like I've reiterated in the past, that the person that is head of the meeting, chair, or you, president, vice president, are going through that exercise of, okay, this directive was proposed. Are we all in agreement? Is there anybody that's not? Okay, based on the feedback or lack thereof, this seems like this is what we are agreeing to. So superintendent, this is the directive you're given by the board. So that it's a clear, the board is giving this directive, because without that extra level of clarification, that's gotten us in trouble
Yeah.
and caused some aggravation.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Mr. Powell?
Yes, Ellen.
Well, I think one of the things that we've been striving to do and need to continue is, yes, that clear direction, and then that the minutes reflect that clear direction, so there's a record.
Yeah, minutes reflect.
So I think we need to, we can always make things even better, but just, we need to solidify that that's just a given, that, hey, there's, in the board meeting, it's clear that this is board direction, and then we make sure that that gets reflected in the minutes, so there's a record of it.
Well, and that's a great point, because one of the items that was on the consent agenda was great that it was referred back to when it was voted for, but whenever, I didn't look at both of the dates. But the more recent one, on that TELP one, I was reading through it, looking at the minutes, looking at the agenda, and I'm like, this ain't giving me nothing. So thank you for telling me, but without listening to the actual discussion, it didn't give me bearings as to what it actually was for. So we, like that, a clear minutes breakdown of anything would be very helpful.
What do you mean? I'm sorry, I didn't understand what.
Instead of having a very broad, vague minute,
Thing was this meeting.
there was a discussion about dogs, and we moved on. That doesn't tell me what the discussion was.
So do you mean you want to know when in the meeting it took place, or?
Not necessarily
just
that,
more
but if we're going
details?
to have a discussion and let's say there's a direction, like we've talked about, and the direction was affirmed and that direction was done, then we clearly state it. Or if there was a consternation over a particular element that has us hung up, then I think that that warrants documenting that in the minutes because it clarifies where there's a disconnect or a disagreement up to whatever our vote is or our decision is. So it respectfully voices or respectfully represents what we are trying to communicate out. Because we know that we're speaking to the public, but the minutes don't necessarily we don't want it like word by word, but the minutes don't necessarily represent what we are trying to represent in our words. It's probably my broad statement in that manner.
Somewhat what we've been doing now is there's a link to the section of the video.
That's
There
very
are-
helpful.
Yeah.
That is
Looking-
amazing.
So that's trying to help us so we can keep our minutes maybe more concise because you just click on the link.
It's true, but
Yeah.
if you're ever like trying to search and say which board meeting talked about blah, 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 if you don't actually have a notation about what was affirmed or directive or whatever key wording, it won't hit. And then you have to then go in and like manually deep dive, which isn't the end of the world, but how many meetings do we have in a year times years?
That's because it's a PDF. So because everything's attached as a PDF, that's why it's not searchable in the same way. So
Possibly, I mean, I'm not super familiar yet with board books, but that, I think
Depends on the AI.
board books is
mechanism.
supposed to help with that, but
I do think that's something where we can
Is it
take
more
some
searchable?
responsibility also of, being able to search on our own device for, when did we talk about sustainability, for example? And it will pull up my documents, like every one that says sustainability.
Which is true, but whenever you're a newer member, you don't have that lengthy background.
Right, that's fair.
I won't often put in a plug for AI, but it does
Oh, I use it all the
capture the
time.
information from the video, just as an FYI. It's another way to search that can be useful.
I'll have to find out which one you're using, because mine does not dissect the video. So,
I think that was helpful too, Ashley, because when you were, the example that you gave about TELP, okay, to me that goes to like asking questions. So you're looking at like the upcoming agenda or whatever, and I appreciate what you're saying that, yeah, it's hard to find all of that, and I think that it's nice that, we're now trying to tie it to the video. But to me, that was a good example where, Ashley sent a follow-up question, and she said, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm paraphrasing that, okay, I can't remember exactly where that TELP conversation was and what was discussed. Can you refresh my memory or something like that? And so Alan, responded to the question, and when I saw it, I was going, oh, wow, thank you. And I think that kind of helped you because you got direction from Alan. But I think that, to me, what that shows is if we are asking questions in advance, not only is it helping Ashley with her question, it helped me as well. So that's a good way that we support each other as a team, that, okay, if you're looking at something and you have a question, get it out there so that the others have the benefit of it as well.
yeah. So basically the BCCing when it's information being shared out.
Yeah.
And I love that, because then it's not keeping us all siloed from each other.
Could you clarify some more where you are on that? Because I think that often just the BCCing on information going out. A lot of times board members ask questions
Yeah.
Okay.
we don't always reply to everybody, nor was the original email to everybody. Is there a board preference for, we've talked about this before.
I prefer a reply, like, that it's shared out to all. If we're in that conversation, and then it's kind of how this conversation has gone with regarding the Safe Schools case. Ashley asked a question, crickets, I chimed in, where are we at? Here's my take on this. Then
Annie responded, and I mean, I was following it as well.
and
Yeah.
Christina
Yeah.
chimed in and was like, I was collecting information, but yes to this, whatever. And then there was another piece, and then it got quiet again. And then where are we at again? We have today. So if we don't have, and maybe nothing had been spoken up to that point, which was a little concerning because we're gearing up for tonight's meeting and it was like midday today. But without being looped in, it seems like there's non-responsiveness, which is frustrating because we all benefit from that information. It's not a decision discussion, it's an information discussion.
Ashley?
I would say the Safe Schools cases, because there's attorney-client privilege in Safe Schools, is not necessarily the best example because things can go back and forth differently when it's under attorney-client privilege. So I'd give the example of TELP, that when someone asks a question and those questions are directed through board leadership, so not every board member receives every email that every person sends. Sorry, everyone who does receive them all. But it limits some of the burden. When that email about TELP goes out, then it's very helpful if Alan thinks, as he did in this case, that the answering the TELP question to everyone is useful, he sends it out. When it becomes very difficult is then when there is a lot of exchange back and forth about TELP, which did not occur, right? He
Yeah.
said the thing, everyone said, thank you for that information. We then proceeded to vote. If there had been additional follow-up questions, it becomes an issue where then we are deliberating on TELP, which
Yeah.
we have to vote on, which we cannot do.
Yeah, which
So
somebody can
it's,
stop that.
yeah, so I would say what happened with TELP is the perfect example of how looping people in a way that is like appropriate and reasonable can happen. And the question is then if there continues to be exchange about it, if you reply all to an email where we were BCC'd, now we're just like undoing the function of a BCC, which means like do not reply. So that we have all the information we need to make a good decision, but that we don't deliberate about the decision. That's the example I would give.
think that's the ultimate, whether it's BCC'd or not, it's really about, are we sharing information, are we deliberating? And then if we cross that line, somebody says, we've crossed that line, we now need to stop. But that's the part I would prefer, that there is more of a share of information, because maybe Ashley asked a question that, like, I didn't ask, and it wasn't a group share, that share of that information, if somebody else didn't determine that share would have been helpful, but it had been shared, I would have been like, oh, that's a fabulous question. Thank you for making me aware of that piece. I wish that would happen more often, because I think that there's more things that are happening that if all of us knew, it would bring us more cohesively together on what's going on, so that we are more on the same, or at least our knowledge level is more on the same page as we're going in to have the discussions and make the decisions whenever it's in the business meetings.
And I do think that's something sometimes where another thing we could take accountability for ourselves. Like if I asked many questions about the consent agenda, for instance, and I didn't anticipate that Alan wanted to send 10 emails about purchase order questions. If I really had a question about, like, for instance, hand to heart, which I did, and it had been answered from a prior meeting, then I was able to connect the dots. I could have certainly said in the discussion on consent, I just wanted to clarify this question. I think everyone would benefit from knowing. Hand to heart goes above and beyond our scope of our nursing services because of these reasons. So I think we can also take some accountability to do that, what number are we on?
Okay, because we've got to move on, and thank you. I mean, I appreciate the clarification, but we need to get down to like 3, and
Yeah.
and that's minutes from meetings between leadership and superintendent are kept and distributed. I mean, that's something that we have really tried to work on. Do you feel like we are getting that to you?
I would say you're getting it. I would say it's sometimes
Okay.
a little slow.
Yeah, sometimes, and, okay, and
I know life happens.
I think I think that's a valid observation, and I'm aware of that as well.
Overall,
Okay.
it's lovely to receive those.
Okay.
I have one, reading that norm, that are kept. So I don't believe we have a common place where they're kept,
Oh.
other than the email is sent.
Oh,
So
okay.
do we need to say, as people move off the board, do we need to save all those to a specific location? Or is the email sufficient? I mean,
Kept just means taken. Like minutes being kept means they were taken,
so the fact that
right?
Okay.
you have them and the email goes out,
Okay.
that's meeting the definition.
Okay, so we've taken care of that. All right.
Secret words.
Okay. So let's move down to 4. Okay. Establish a norm defining how many times an item should be reviewed, discussed before a board action is made, including what settings are appropriate for introduction, discussion, and voting. We have fallen out of the practice, reaffirm what this, okay.
I disagree. I think we're doing fairly good. There's some things that don't need to go through 3.
How do the rest of you feel?
I think when this said reaffirm, that meant reaffirm is what the subcommittee was directed to do, not
Right,
that.
okay, and
it
if you
was-
look over here,
Yeah, exactly.
okay,
Oh,
to me, the way that you could, and I don't think that we have time to look at this at length, but if you go over and look at now the blue copy one on number 4, here's the subcommittee's recommendation, and it even gave you like a flow chart as to how we were going to do that. That was, okay, Superintendent Grant.
Did you also copy this off?
I thought that,
is it?
did she give you
The
that?
one pager?
The one page.
Okay,
Guiding practices and preferences? Yes.
okay.
These weren't quite norms in the same way, but it did, so then part of the subcommittee said, put it in the quick guide, that's what this preferences and practices.
Yeah, I was getting to that, thank you.
okay.
Well, no, that's fine. Okay, so you've got it here, you've got it in this one. I think that the subcommittee, and to me, this is the way that we should address this. Does the board feel good about this? Okay, all right, we can go on to 5.
I think a norm that we developed over the year that I've actually used to my benefit a lot when things maybe need to push through a little quicker is using the subcommittee as the first reading. So that development is not
yes.
reflected in these documents, so I don't know if we add
I
that
think you
somewhere.
could reasonably add that to the
Okay,
report,
add
because it was
to-
something we discussed,
Yeah, we
but then
did.
wasn't
Okay,
reflected in the final
so we're going
document.
to add, you can have a first read in
Or-
the subcommittee.
Yeah,
So the-
I think too, though, I think this
Oh,
goes back to
thanks,
what we
Sandy.
were talking about earlier, is if the first read is on the subcommittee and it's like an important topic, shouldn't there be a memo so the other members know?
Yeah.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Just because if
With memo.
all of a sudden it's on like a discussion agenda and you're like, wait, I wasn't fully aware of this or something.
That makes sense, especially what played out with the budget approvals.
Okay, so can we say that you can have a first read in committee followed up with a memo?
All the
So-
time, or just when, and Annie was mentioning important, kind of, or something, do we want to put a?
I think if you say important, that's relative. So if
Yeah.
it's better to just say all the time, whether it's just a simple
Okay.
overview, and you determine who in each subcommittee is responsible for that.
Well, and the way that you could do that is the memo can be very simple. It was, okay, we had a first read of whatever it was in subcommittee, and this was the response, or maybe there isn't even a response, but you know what, there was a first read.
Well, and this, I think, comes down to our 6:30 discussion of the subcommittee. So right now, how we report out is in board member reports. Part of the discussion there might be, should we, because we do take minutes, minutes or maybe, do we send out a report in an email, hey, subcommittee met this week and this is what we discussed, and then we can include those first read items in there? Or do we want to just say, okay, if we couch something as a first read, then that's what we send out? I think we can discuss that more in that agenda item.
Okay, board, how do you feel about that? Do you think
Yeah.
there should just be a report that comes with every committee meeting, or, like an email report? Or do we do it verbally in a board meeting?
I think at minimum, it should be an email because the verbal ones, it's hard to keep track of. And then we can still integrate the board report or discussion in there when we get to that piece. But I think I don't like having just verbal discussions without that written documentation because it's getting us in trouble.
Ashley, you had a thought?
I was just going to say they are documented in the minutes, which is what Alan pointed out. I think we could talk about this for a very long time.
Yeah, we could.
And people would say what they would like, but just as easily to say, I didn't listen to it in the board meeting or retain it. I also received, 1,000 emails, and so I also did not retain it. I think it could go anyway. And I think using the meeting structure makes the most sense because we're reporting back to the whole group, but that's just one opinion.
Charlotte?
I would just chime in that if the meetings are not, if those board member reports are not at like 11:30 PM,
Yeah.
it's easier to retain.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, sometimes we're so tired that it's harder for us to retain those, which is why I send memo so that it's like, I know for sure what happened, but yeah.
If we're having
Yeah.
the executive committee do their own emails updating, then it's no harm, no foul if the committees do the similar. Sorry.
Yeah, I just think sometimes things are spoken so quickly in the board meeting and a lot of information comes that I would like to have it written down as well. It would be helpful for me. But if it's in the minutes,
The minutes are still not overly detailed.
And I'm not sure we've been sending subcommittee meeting minutes to the full board. We send it out to the subcommittee, but I don't believe they've been going out to the full
Correct.
board.
And I find no harm in doing such.
so I think if it's meant to be a first read, like a report, that should be,
Communicate it out.
yeah, communicated out as a report or a first read on this issue somehow.
Okay, so what I'm going to say is we'll talk about that a little bit more
Okay.
when we get to the board meeting thing, because this kind of ties to that. Okay, how are we going to do how are we going to do committee reports and board meeting? It may be impacted by what we decide with how we're sending out minutes and all of that sort of stuff, because we got to plow through this, guys. Okay. Number 5, determine the timing for when the board meeting agenda is shared with board members prior to the public. Okay. It seems like we're taking care of that. Ashley?
I would just say, when we've talked about this in the past, we have talked about going multiple months out, so we have improved, but it does still seem like agenda setting is very immediate and tight and not
Okay,
as far
so
forward.
agenda setting more in advance, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
How does that correlate to the fact that they've got the calendar going? Because that's kind of a long-term projection with the different variables that come up.
Yeah.
I'm still feeling.
I still think sometimes then things end up getting needlessly shuffled because the agenda setting hasn't planned multiple months in advance. It just used to be very helpful when we did 3. Now it's only, or not 3, 6, right? Between 5 and 6.
Probably a complicator, sorry. you guys that do the agenda settings all the time is when we have the third person pop in and they have their own priorities. So then you're having to remember what the prior one's priorities are and not like stifle their intention and then, but squeeze in the other person and then those last minute, like, I think that's tricky, isn't it?
I mean, that's when I think planning 3 months in advance prevents it from being a priority conversation and keeps it agenda setting.
Okay.
That when, all I can say is we used to do it that way. It was easier and it was more focused on the agendas rather than topics of note.
Was it, my question would be, would it be a hindrance for timely work? Because you all know that I push back whenever we only had one business meeting per month and one study session per month because it prevented timely business. And so if it's, there would obviously be flexibility when people are requesting an item to be added to the agenda and other things. But if it's locking in that amount of time, and we have so many things that seem to come up that need to be handled in a timely manner, not 3 months down the road, if we kind of have that guideline of 3 months out, has that historically run into an issue where you're not able to address timely issues?
I would say everything was addressed in a more timely way when we did it that way. And the reason being, because things did not get forgotten, because they weren't only happening in that meeting right then. There was some foresight. That's just one opinion.
That it was
I'm
reflected-
wondering-
It was reflected on the calendar.
And also those agenda setting meetings that were for 3 months in advance were shorter than our current agenda setting meetings. They never lasted longer than an hour.
You did 3 months? 6 agendas.
Like up to 5, as I recall.
Were they kind of a rolling?
Yes. And so the last one,
Agendas are, like, next month's agenda has kind of already been discussed once or twice.
Yes.
So we're just kind of polishing it up and making sure. we're good.
exactly, that's what made it more efficient. And then the future ones were almost in some sense blank. And it helped things get moved around and things like, your committee, for example, that continue to be postponed is something that would have been able to be addressed immediately because everyone was looking bigger picture. Just as one example. But yeah, it would, you remember most of the future ones were basically blank. And then people would go plug in what those were, and there wasn't as much discussion about these because they'd already been discussed, they were already planned.
Things kind of get
They were
fleshed out
firm,
over
yeah.
a couple different agenda setting.
And then more people are able to provide their input.
Okay, we got to move on. We got 5 minutes, we got Richard here, and we've still got, a number of things we got to look through. Okay,
Would you like to just talk about the two that, essentially, any of these could be changed or talked about us at any time, but there are two primarily that it seems like are up for discussion, the
Yeah.
3 and the
those are the
study
ones
session.
that I even had on that agenda that
Yeah.
I really want us to
So
look
maybe
at.
we should skip to those two.
Okay, let's do that, okay. Well, there was the 3 to agree. Where are we on 3 to agree?
I'm comfortable with it at this
Let's
point.
define what it means.
Okay. That's a good idea. Let's define what 3 to agree means.
My understanding is it's an additional second on
That's
a
right.
request.
Okay,
And I'm fine with it, except I will say, the reason we did not do it the first time in the discussion was because there was some concern about moving closer and closer to 4 and creating what constitutes a rolling quorum, trying to receive a second and a third, as it were. So I think it's reasonable to say the amount of requests coming are too numerous, and perhaps asking for an additional person would reduce the requests. I don't know if it will fulfill that goal or not, because I think most of us would be amenable to doing what everyone wants to, oh, Amanda would like to do da-da-da, sure. I'm happy to support her in doing that. And Bryce would say, also, fine. So will it actually fulfill the goal? But that's the idea, and that's why we didn't do it before. I'm 6s on whether we do it or not.
And I think it kind of potentially weeds out the moments where we have outlier asks the majority may be like, I can't get behind it. So where the majority of the time we probably are going to agree, it helps resolve those extreme outliers that may happen, especially with upcoming board changes.
Okay, so how would we feel if we said that we tried this to see if it does help us kind of limit it? And then we can get a feel for if that's help. Okay.
And just
Okay.
to clarify, you mean requests like for study sessions or for
Board meeting.
agenda topics? Okay.
Okay.
And when you say try it, our handbook still says what it says,
Right.
right? So how would we deal with that? For example, if I really wanted something on and Bryce was to second it, and our handbook says that you have to put it on, well, we're agreeing to do this. So right now, the group is agreeing that that practice would be lapsed while we wait. And then,
We see how effective it is.
and then at what point would you imagine we decide so that we don't default to the handbook and get grumpy about it?
That's a good idea. Should we say,
A pilot program, a pilot for how many months?
should we,
revisit it at latest November, and then solidify how we're going to move forward and get the handbook updated accordingly if there needs to be changes. So we can say November 1 and add it on the most relevant
November.
board meeting.
Yeah.
So I think, so you have something solid, and either the handbook gets updated by January as you'll see the new board, or we keep it as is and the trial, it ends.
okay,
Trial period.
okay, see how it's worked in November, the first board meeting in, or second, when?
Let's add it to our.
First board meeting in November.
It's time to,
Okay, that will only give us like 2 months, because really, nothing's going to happen during the summer. So it's going to be like September and October. Is that going to give us enough time to see, or should we, that's my only thing.
I would suggest the subcommittee is the one who talks about it in November and then decides what action comes back, if any.
Okay, the subcommittee talks about it.
Because
in-
you'll have to talk about it anyway.
Okay, all right, subcommittee,
well, it's the same.
It's the same
same
committee.
thing, okay.
I think there's
Okay.
generally a November meeting historically for that committee,
Yeah.
so just add it to that November agenda.
Yeah.
Subcommittee talks, or looks at it in November. Okay, the next one, and this is now going to the agenda that I gave you, and that's the study session, okay? How do we feel about having a second study session? Board leadership has heard from some individuals that they think that we should have a study session with every board meeting. For myself, I think that that is too much. I think that we're talking about how we're trying to make it so that we're not in meetings from, or for 5 hours. Well, if you're doing a study session, that adds a meeting. To me, it seems like one study session a month is appropriate, and that also helps you really, as a board member, decide, is this something that I really think is important enough to take a study session? But that takes, board members have to be responsible about that in their thinking. That's my thought.
Can we word it in a way that it's preferred, 1 per month, but if there is a need? I just can't stand the hard stops, because that's the way it was before I joined the board. It was only 1 business meeting per month, so you couldn't make business decisions and actions except 1 time per month. And we can see that since that's been changed, we have made decisions every freaking meeting. So the need for timely decisions exists. And so doing a hard stop, I'm not saying I'm interested in having a study session every single meeting, but I am interested in, if we need it, we do it, because at the end of the day, we're here to do the work for the district and for the students. And if it's inconvenient for us to do it, then we need to rethink why we're doing this. So we could say the preference is 1 per month. However, if there is a need to do a second, we could consider that with 3 to agree, or something like that.
Kind of where
I-
go ahead, Annie.
I feel the same way. I'm the one who said we could have more than one a month. Obviously, I'm new, so I don't know the full history, but I do think it's just as needed, because I think what's happened oftentimes is study sessions get pushed off, and they're actually relevant topics to what decisions are being made, and allow for like a little bit more discussion and information sharing than just during a board meeting. But I think if we have one as the norm, but as needed, if we're seeing a need to have 2 a month or something, then we could add one, you know, for example, related to the budget or something. I think it's kind of hard to information share among the board by BCCing and then doing small group meetings and stuff. I feel like we've all set aside our Tuesdays as days where we are going to be doing a board meeting. And so to me, adding that hour on the front end doesn't make the hugest difference if the other parts of the meeting are run efficiently. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
That's exactly what.
Ashley has her hand, oh, sorry, excuse me, Bryce, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say very similar to Annie, and I think as we get to the conversation around board meeting structure, maybe some of those concerns or worries might even themselves out.
I think the trade-off that we're not talking about is that the hour before is still utilized when we don't have a study session. We just don't have to have any executive sessions in the middle of the night. And I think what has actually suffered is our ability to have closed executive sessions that are at a time when people are functioning. And I think that I certainly can understand when there are extenuating circumstances. I also think the trade-off when we're not mindful that it really would be in an extenuating circumstance is that we're not able to do closed business effectively when we don't reserve that time.
Raise a very valid concern.
True, but we don't necessarily, those aren't isolated to the meetings that we don't have the study sessions. We still could run into that in the meetings where we have the study sessions. So, yeah, if we decide not to, if we decide to only have one study session per month, we still have a 50% chance that we're going to end up in the same situation regardless.
Okay, the thing that I think that we should do there is, okay, that's one that maybe ties to the board meeting. So I'm putting a little check by that. So we're going to go and we'll look at that one when we look at the other. Okay. Subcommittee meeting schedules. Where does the board fall on that with?
Where are we at? I'm
Okay,
sorry.
this is on the agenda that I gave you, okay? And underneath board norms, third bullet point, okay, we've talked about three to agree. We just put a check mark by study session, but now we're on subcommittee meeting schedules.
Intent on that.
Well, the intent, and we referred to that a little bit earlier about we now have subcommittees that are saying, okay, we're going to have a subcommittee meeting every month, or we're now going to have 2 subcommittee meetings every month. And I have heard some board members say, well, that's up to the subcommittee. But to me, that's something that really is a board decision, because one of the things that I get concerned about, and this is one board member, but then sometimes you're creating work when you didn't need to create more work.
You have an
And I think
example of-
I think that's where we run into trouble sometimes.
Do you have an example of that?
Ashley? Oh, she was nodding before you, I'm sorry.
you're fine.
She said to me, do you have an example, right?
Okay.
I was looking at
Oh,
it.
and I don't know if you have an example. Like I would say in the
go ahead.
policy subcommittee, for example, I know you have to deal with a lot of legislative changes, and then you have to, deal with bringing those into compliance, bringing them to us. We approve them and so forth. And so it's not really an optimal time to add new policies, especially with the legislature doing the significant amount of changes that they're requiring. So that would be one example where I think it would be reasonable for the board to say, you should be limiting it just simply so we're not approving a great variety of new policies while all simultaneously doing this. Same
Thank you
things.
for doing, because that's what I was going to, but
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot of talking, so I appreciate
And
your
then
interjecting that.
for finance, I would say we talked about this in the last finance subcommittee meeting. It's my opinion that we need to talk about the overall scope of work we have to do and then batch it out. Because what happens when we add meetings is I think sometimes we add topics to them that are not necessarily things we were directed to do. And then the things we were directed to do have to be extended to the next and the next and the next. And so I don't have a very precise example to share, but I think it's reasonable to say what the expectation is, from the group that we want to make sure is getting done. And I think one way to do that is by looking at the overall scope of work and then deciding what goes and what stays.
Yeah, and I think I like that. The focus would be more on what is the intention of the scope of work, not a directive in the number of meetings, because we ramped up our
Exactly.
meetings in the finance committee with the legislative session that was crazy, to try to process through all of that, as well as all of the board budget work as well. And there were some things that also didn't get resolved, so we brought them back because we were run out of time in those discussions. So if the board was like, just roughly speaking, finance committee, you only have 4 meetings to get your work done. To be frank, I think that would be absurd. The committee knows what we're dealing with, and it's our responsibility to figure out how to handle it responsibly. And as well as the policy subcommittee, and then we have these other subcommittees as well. So it's more, to me, the bigger issue is, do we have, are the subcommittees that are listed still relevant? And the ones that aren't established, like the policy subcommittee and the finance subcommittee, how are those needing to be functioning, because those have fallen out of practice? So figuring out the holes on the ones that aren't really functioning regularly, or what was maybe originally intended, and really that could be a study session, speaking of, and figuring out what was the intention behind all these subcommittees and what's currently happening, and do we still need this subcommittee, or is something else more relevant based on our board priorities and what's happening in the district? So.
Bryce?
I think I get what you're saying, but kind of a separate thing. The board only has 2 subcommittees. The others are district or...
The board's assigned to them.
Correct, but I'm just saying I don't know that we have the decision-making power to change how those... I don't know if that's actually what you're saying. but-
I'm talking more in respect
we
to
participate.
how that we're assigned to these different committees. And I've been assigned to one that I've had to,
You're saying now I misunderstood.
figure out how to even function within something that has never been, that guidance has never been given.
Thanks for that clarity. I get what you're saying.
You get me?
Yep, I might have been on that committee before, so.
Yes.
Okay, Alan?
I think somewhere along those lines too, we don't ever define the roles of these 2 committees. I've seen the finance committee morph a lot on what it does and doesn't do, and not for good or bad. The finance committee is actually relatively new. We used to just have the board audit committee, which met once a year to review the audit with the auditors. And then, I don't know, maybe 10 or less years ago, it changed to the finance committee and was those 5 meetings a year. And to be honest, we used to struggle of, what are we going to talk about this time? And we would invent stuff to fill the meeting. Well, those that are on the finance committee meeting, no, we don't have that problem anymore.
Now we don't have
Yeah.
enough time for the meetings.
But
Policy committee.
would we want to define the roles of these committees so then we can better identify what needs to,
Occur within them.
right?
That makes sense.
So do we need to have a study session about these committees.
I second it.
mean, because we don't have time now to talk anymore about this and what their role is. I guess the thing that I'm concerned about is, I mean, you gave an example as to kind of what I'm alluding to, that initially it was like, well, what are we going to talk about? But now it's like, you've created more work. Do you get what I'm saying? That sometimes when you open it up like that, it's Pandora's box. And then it just grows and it grows and it grows. And I'm not trying to make it so that we're not doing our work. But what I am trying to say is, do we need to think about, are we creating work that isn't,
Starting to micromanage.
yeah, micromanaging, or are we creating work that isn't effective or
Beneficial.
beneficial? And I mean, Ashley gave a really good example, and that's why I was speaking in that sense. Okay, with the policy subcommittee, we do have all of those things that come from the legislature, and I mean, we have to do those. And there are deadlines on when those policies have to be revised. And, you know, it's a problem if you haven't made those changes. So you've got that that's going on, but then you get like a board member that says, well, you know what, I think it would be really good to have a policy on yada, yada, yada. And you're kind of going, well, okay, but you know what, I think that that's covered. I already think that's covered in this policy. Yeah, maybe we could go in and tweak it a little bit, or maybe we could put, you know, an additional thing in the administrative procedures. But you're telling us that you want a whole policy, and that to me is overwhelming. It's like, where do we stop with, well, that'd be a good policy. Oh, how about that? That sounds good. Anyway.
Study session.
Well,
Charlotte.
I don't know if
and
it
then
needs a separate study session, but if, I mean, we do need
Okay, we're
a
15 minutes
description
over.
of
We got to
the role
figure out
of
how.
the committee.
Yeah, but we got to figure that out in the discussion, which it could be a part of agenda too.
I agree with Charlotte. I think the committees can talk about it and propose
Yeah.
something and then determine if we needed a study session. Because to go back to your point, it then is self-fulfilling that we are then directed more work to do rather than just taking this in. We all represent these different committees and being able to talk about it.
Okay, so the two committees are going to talk and decide, okay, and whether we need to look at this more.
I
Okay?
would say, take that beyond that. We've been assigned to more than 2 subcommittees. Because I think we also need to get clarity in all of that expectation. Otherwise, we need to take them off of our subcommittee assignments.
Okay?
I think that that's fair.
I don't like to feel like I'm not doing my job and I don't know what my job is.
Okay.
I think with those other committees, if we have that clarification by the time, because we're set to reconstitute those committee, redo those assignments come January, and do that work before then, so that whoever says, oh, I'll take on that committee, has a good understanding of what that
Actually,
means.
yeah. And if it's a functioning committee.
Okay, I'm going to say that we're ending our discussion on board norms. We're going to move into our dinner. We had 45 minutes scheduled for that. We're now 15 minutes behind. The board evaluation is like a critical piece. So we're going to take the 45 minutes, and where we can get those 15 minutes from is going to be board goals.
There's,
So get your dinner and bring it. I
yes,
think it's
and
just
there's dinners
boxed.
for everyone. Justin, Jordan, sorry, Jordan, Richard, feel free down there.
Okay, Richard, you're allowed more than a cookie.
Say, should we record what Richard chose for dinner?
And everybody had offered, but I go, well, I think I'll have this, and then I can talk while
Okay.
you guys are eating, and
And then you can eat.
Grab one
Later,
on your way
grab-
out if you'd like. It's in
Yes.
the
okay, and
fridge.
we'll make up a little bit of time for you, if that's works for you guys.
Yes, thank you, Richard, for taking the time to be here. We really appreciate the support from USBA, and these are really valuable, these board evaluations. So I'm sorry that we're a little bit late, but I'm hoping we can get you on your way so that you're not getting to Spanish Fork at 10 o'clock.
Well, I hope not, and I thought maybe I was going to be late getting here because there was some big backup of traffic on I-15 getting here. I left the office in Sandy and get on the freeway, and I get down to about 7,200 or 50.
cluster right there.
There must be something there, and there's one of the overhead, signs, and it said, time to 600 South, 40 minutes.
Oh,
What's going on here? There's something. So anyhow, was able to get here and still a few minutes early, so.
Thank you. And Annie, please interject. I'm sorry that I'm not seeing if your hand's up. If you have something to say. Okay, Richard.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks to all of you for your quick reply to the evaluation. I know everybody got it in on time. You may have waited a little bit longer because of vacations or something else, but when it come right down to it, thank you very much for doing that, because I think that's the first. We're at. Yeah. And thank you.
You want one?
And there's one for me there. Yep, that'd be great. And I will just say right off the bat that there is some improvement from last year. And so I decided the thing I was going to do is and if you look at this one right here that has the bars on it, you can see it's just a slight improvement last year. And then I've, broken that out. So you can see by each category where, you were this year compared to last year. So obviously you can see there with the legend that last year is in the blue and this year is the green bars. And then behind that, you don't need to go there, but behind that is all of the question by question detail, so that you can go and look if you want each one of them with the 7 of you. And and I would say it was really some interesting comments in the back, because we ask you 2 questions in the back. What is it that the board did well, and what do you wish the board would do? And so there is some really good ideas there that I think for you to go to and take a look at. Kind of interesting, as you had your discussion about policy and subcommittees and such, that seems to be the one thing in here that there was quite a bit of comment about, at least it caught my attention anyhow. That's something that you guys do well. Seems that there's pretty good thought about that you guys do policy really well. And of course, how a board governs. I think that, the legislature makes but a Board of Education governs policy. And so, the discussion around policy for you guys, the thing you have to do, I think, is a little bit of some of your conversation here this evening, and that is that, you have to be super careful with that power, because you don't want to, I think, as I've heard here, go overboard on policy, because you can just make policy. And sometimes boards will go, well, that's what we got to do to fix a problem, is with a policy. And that's not always the answer. Because you can create policy all the time, and there'll be people or situations that will arise, and they will go around that policy, because there will be some loophole, if you will, in it, or whatever. And so then the tendency is to write another policy. So just, I think with your whole discussion was certainly so appropriate here around policy, at least in, my experience and what I have found with boards. So anyhow, I don't know if you guys have got any questions that you have. We can talk more about the evaluation here, but I think with what we've provided with this executive summary here for you with the bars, this chart, and then the question by question detail there, I think you can go back and take a look at those if you wanted to dig in deeper. But I think, the real value to you guys is really right there in the end with those two questions and the comments that are there. I think could be helpful as you guys talk about some goals, as you talk about what you did over here on this board to be successful this year. I think you can find some comments in there that could be very helpful to you. So any comments, questions? You guys are the ones that went through and completed it. Any that you have that way that we could talk about? Yeah, sure.
Well, did any red flags? Was there anything there that you found a little bit concerned about, or?
Concerned? No, I would say that. I would say, no, no concerns. I think, again, if you go to the back there, there's always different perspectives that people have, because there's one comment that says, we do superintendent and BA evaluation really well. And then there's a comment in there about, what can we do better? And somebody goes, well, I think we could do better at the superintendent BA evaluation. And so, there's always different perspectives there that people have. And I think you need to address it and see if, whatever the tool is you're using, if that is helpful and productive for you. But good question. And Charlotte, I'm not sure anybody's ever asked me that question.
Really?
Yeah.
Ever?
Ever. And
Wow.
I've done hundreds of these, actually. And nobody's ever asked me in that fashion.
A little bit negative.
But no, I haven't noticed or that I would say there was anything really that it was a red flag for sure in there. I think it was all just very valuable kinds of information that's there. So.
Someone send me a picture of that.
Sure of what part?
Oh, yes, you don't have that. That is,
Copy, because I
yeah.
don't have it. Thanks.
Well, it's a whole big
Do you have an electronic version we can send?
notebook.
We do, and also there's a copy for here.
Yeah, we got an extra one that Brian has, but if you
Yep.
have an electronic, because she's out of state.
And if there, I don't have access to that electronic one
Okay,
here right
well,
now.
what I could do is I could take a picture. I'll
Yeah,
take
if
a
there's one that
picture,
you'd like to see.
Annie, and I'll send it to
Or
you.
I could certainly send it to her tomorrow.
Okay, he's going to send it to you tomorrow, but I'll send a picture to you of the summary thing. Annie, I'm sorry we weren't thinking about that.
Well, Brian, I think unless there's any other questions, this is the report, this is the results of it, and so I would just leave that with you. And again, I would say that the comments in the back is probably the most valuable part of this evaluation here, because there were some great comments in there and ideas and things for you to go. The only other thing that I would say is I went through that, and I did. I read all of the questions with the answers, and then all of those in the back of your comments there. It seemed like that there was, maybe just a little bit of a hint or something there about the community engagement. And I think that COVID certainly created this divide with our plate and going, okay, that could be something maybe that, we need to work on. And they know it's there, the issue. And so maybe that's something that becomes one of those goals for you guys, is saying, okay, what would that look like? What can we do? How can we do it? And again, it's a great challenge.
It's in the works. Thanks to Brian.
Well, Richard, you honed in on the one that I have been anxious about, and I think we are working on that. I did, because as I look at this about we did go down. Do you see that with other boards,
We do. There can kind of be a few things that can do a little porpoising, that can go up and down. I think that's pretty typical. And then, of course, you have Annie on the on that when there's only 7 of you.
Our last review.
Yeah. Certainly not.
Oh, okay,
anything.
that makes sense. You're saying because we have had one board member replaced and I mean, that's not saying that it's all reflective with Annie, but it isn't the same board. The board member. Okay.
Yeah, and all score, and you can see that went up just slightly. Then I'd say, okay, well, maybe we, or, maybe if there was some, but certainly to see that, and I'd like to just end, this is always, and you guys have all heard my analogy, but since it's baseball season, I'll use my baseball analogy here.
Okay.
And that is that I always say, if this trying to just try and find all the great things This is to find areas where that can be helpful. So 8 to 9 range, yeah, that's a home run. So eight. And so, yeah, I'll take a base hit.
Or a triple.
Just on base, that's all.
Yeah, that's all that
on base.
matters. Yeah, that's how you win games, is getting somebody on base. And, and so for you guys, I would say, man, take it. That's pretty darn good. Is where you're at. So anyhow, I told you I'd try and make up some time, and I'm going to, and I will end with that. Thank you all again for jumping in and completing it. I think it was helpful, and we'll, whenever you want to do it again, and we can help you with it, and if that's next year, we're happy to do that. I do a number of board evaluations every year, and so, we're just happy to do that, or, superintendent or BA evaluations, we have those tools for that. Brian and Bryce are both very, very familiar with that. So anyhow.
Richard, thank you. There's just one thing that I would want to interject, having served on that, chairing that evaluation committee or whatever for a time. I would encourage each of us as board members, now that you have the evaluation, to go and look at it and see where your colleagues are, because you may be more critical than the others, or you may be giving a pass and I think that that's helpful for, anyway, me as a board member to see how my other board members are viewing this. It helps me understand where we are as a team, So.
Okay, well, thank you again, and I will, Annie, I will send that to you in the morning. I will email you this whole presentation here, so.
Okay, thank you.
Annie, did you get the picture that I sent you?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you again, and.
Richard.
Yeah, and good luck, and appreciate being here. And there was an extra copy there.
Yes, there's
right there
two,
for
yeah.
Nate and
Right.
Annie, if she wants a hard
Okay,
copy of
great.
it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks again.
Right. Safe travels.
Okay.
Yep.
It looks like everyone's back. So I'm thinking that we can go on to board meeting structure. That was scheduled for 6:30, and thank you, Richard. We recovered some time there. Ashley was very gracious and put together a handout that you all should have received. Ashley, would you be willing to walk us through that?
Yep, it's one page. It has some
It's on the board letterhead or on the,
different bullets on it. It does not have a header, but the first thing you'll see is background. So when I sent my questions for the board meeting, I had asked if there were attachments for the things we were reviewing on the retreat, and Brian said, actually, we're a little behind in gathering some of the attachments. How would you feel about taking on board meeting structure. So I went ahead this today and did that. I apologize you didn't get it sooner. But as background, it's not a mystery that our meetings frequently run very long. And that has a couple of outcomes. It keeps the public waiting to hear what's going to happen until late in the night sometimes. Staff are here all night long, waiting and delaying their commutes home, especially our business administrator who has to lock the building. And it also keeps specifically our student board members away from their commitments. So I do think we have some diligence to do about making our meetings more efficient, and I've made that clear in the past. But to that end, there's a couple of competing philosophies about this. There's some board members who definitely desire that we move more swiftly, and there are other board members, myself included, who kind of think the wheels of governance are meant to be slow because that supports some of our decision making. And the example I would give to that end is that legislators, I think, also want the session to move very quickly and get as much done as possible. Many of us would prefer that they actually have to take some time to make their decisions and delay some of their items, and that sometimes the wheels of governance are meant to ensure that public input happens over a long period of time. But between those two poles of sentiment, I think there are some ways that we could reasonably balance both needs without limiting the amount of actions we could take. And so I've been listening to the meetings since they were on the audio recording that you couldn't get until 2 weeks after the meeting. So when I started teaching as a dance specialist in schools, there were some meetings that I had to listen to as many as 16 years ago. So I have many experiences listening to meetings, and some more better than others. And I really think they've also changed a lot since they started to be filmed. And there's no putting that ketchup back in the bottle. We film them. That's the standard practice, and I just do think it's changed a little bit of how the meetings operate. But if you look at meetings before 2020, which is kind of when streaming came about, they had significantly shorter agendas. They took very limited amounts of actions. The discussions happened over a long period of time and often in alignment with the budget cycle. And what allocations of time means is that if you looked at those agendas, you would find they said 6:15, 7:45, and so forth, and they had a clear time of adjournment. And so keeping that in mind, I have some suggestions looking at lessons from the past, but also some other ideas moving forward. And the first is pretty simple. I think it's something that most of us could agree to, which would be that board leadership, when they set the agenda with the superintendent and business administrator, remain mindful that we have this desire for shorter and more efficient meetings. So in agenda setting, for instance, we say, it looks like the report's agenda could take 2.5 hours. How do we feel about that? And just keep it in mind. The second would be that staff remain mindful that concise presentations and answers support those efficient meetings. So if a board member poses a question to a presenter or to the superintendent or business administrator, that question is answered, with as much efficiency as possible, and that perhaps more comprehensive answers specifically for reports can sometimes be taken offline and given in an informational memo. The third would be that the board remain mindful of what our obligation is in ensuring those things happen, which is that when we send questions in advance, we do emphasize an efficient discussion because the staff member is prepared to give us the answer, and then that answer can be, quick. And also sometimes questions that can get answered occasionally have to be repeated for the public. I definitely do that all the time. I don't want to keep my question a secret. But once in a while, a clarifying question, checking that off your list does limit the amount that you have to share in the meeting itself. One that I think where it becomes things that we should agree, I think all three of those things are things we could reasonably agree are acceptable. They're not a big ask on anyone's part. The fourth is maybe something that we consider, which is putting time signatures back on the agenda. And that when the allotted time has elapsed, the person chairing our meeting, whether it's the president or vice president, should consider that it's normative to declare that those items are postponed, excepting for reasons that are guided by statute. Like we must vote on the budget today, for instance. We had to consent to that today. That would be an example of something we must do. So I think to go back to some different opinions on that, I can imagine some scenarios where in our recent meetings, if the person chairing the meeting had said, seeing that the time has elapsed, we're moving on, I could imagine there are some topics on the reports that people would be particularly looking forward to. They wouldn't want to move on. They would want to continue. And the reason I would still advocate for doing this and considering it a normative practice would be, we don't necessarily do the public or the important topics any favors when we prolong the discussion, which either trades off with other important discussions that get limited attention in the meeting, or it is something where then we don't get all of the questions asked and answered that we wanted. So I think saying we're postponing them also helps us to remember those top 3 items, which are, be efficient ourselves. The next suggestion would be have an expectation for reports with unanswered questions to be considered for future discussion or study, rather than always requiring 5 minutes of conversation per board member. And if you think about that, that's 35 minutes per report. And if we have a meeting, with 5 reports, for example, we've had that, we're looking at like a 2-hour average that we're talking about reports, and that's just our questions. That's not the staff responses. And one thing that happens when I think reports specifically are top-heavy is, Amanda's pointed out, the discussion should be leading to action, and that should be clear. When we spend all of our time on the top half of reports, we really limit the amount we're discussing the items we're meant to be taking action on, rather than saying, hey, it looks like, there are a number of unanswered questions about the sustainability resolution. Let's direct that to a study session or a future discussion, because it looks like there's more to be done. I think that sometimes directing that would be more reasonable than all of us using all of our time, still not having a satisfactory answer to our questions at times, and then there's no continuation point for the discussion. The last would be to adopt practices common in Granite and the state board and some other peer entities where some of them rotate through a board member report that's meant to be positive at the beginning of the meeting. In Granite, there's a 60 seconds only, from what I understand. And I think that what that does, it's very unfortunate when we get to the board member report section of our meeting, people want to share positive news, and it's sometimes 11 p.m., and nobody's listening. So the student you wanted to congratulate, we hope that they have put away their cellular device and gone to bed so that they can attend school in the morning. Or there's, if they're up late, they're studying for a test. And we want to make sure the people we serve are actually able to hear our commendations of what they're doing. So doing something like that at the beginning and replacing board member reports with committee reports as needed would solve some of the other problems that we have, in my personal opinion. So those are some suggestions I'd like us to consider. And I'd also just say we don't need to belabor the rest of them today, but there are some other things that chairs can do to make meetings more efficient. That includes limiting roll call vote to large decisions, like school closure would be an example, where you can reasonably expect there are some differing opinions. But voting on whether or not to go into closed session, certainly people may vote no or abstain. Most commonly, they do not. Most commonly, everyone's in favor or anyone's opposed, and it takes about half or less the time. And the next is offering a majority of direction by unanimous consent, something we talked about earlier today, and also intervening when input is repetitive and calling to conclude discussion. Or saying, I've heard from Bryce and Charlotte, they have 2 very strong opinions. Those are the 2 opinions on the table. Does anyone else have a third suggestion, for example? And I think empowering the chair to do things like that in the meeting is very helpful, in the sense that often the dialogue is repetitive and doesn't change the outcome. So those things we don't necessarily need to discuss. Those would be up to the chair to consider whether to implement. But I think these 6 square bullets that you see on your paper are worth saying, those top 3, is there any disagreement to just having the kind of conscientiousness to this? And then the latter 3, how do people feel about trying to implement some of those practices, specifically the time signatures and the willingness to move on, conclude the meeting at the expected time, and deal on the back end with why we continue to go over, if we in fact do.
Thank you, Ashley. I think that that's really helpful, a lot of those ideas. Who would like to respond? Oh, Amanda. Yeah.
I love that you've broken this down in so much detail. It's very helpful to follow. Where I do want our meetings to be short and efficient, I don't love whenever our meetings are cut off, whenever we're in the middle of important decisions. So in my opinion, we need to kind of balance that with, if a discussion needs to continue, we need to continue it, not just shut down the meeting. Because we've also seen where postponing a discussion just adds to the next agenda meeting and adds to the next and puts us further behind on discussion items. And then I would like to, I like the idea of concise presentations. I don't want that to be misinterpreted with vague and superficial presentations, because those are infuriating. Like I kind of mentioned earlier, whenever the explanation is so simplified that it almost is condescending as a board member, and then it implies that information is being withheld and we're making decisions uninformed. So I support that approach, but with clarification so that it doesn't turn into a harmful presentation. I like the type signatures. I'm hesitant about making it normative to shut down the meeting shut down those discussions once we've hit that time limit automatically. The guided by statute is a good qualifier to extend. I would also say that if a conversation, it would be detrimental to the student, teacher, district, or if it's a legal matter, that those are also reasons that we should complete those discussions and not postpone those, and maybe some others. Let's see. The reports with unanswered questions, I don't mind that being tighter because it does get quite long. However, it does somewhat contradict if we're going to try to do 3 discussions or 3 roughly discussions before we make a decision, whether it's a study session to a report to the discussion agenda before we go to action. If we're going to follow that process and make sure these discussions happen over time, we also shouldn't be shutting down that meaningful conversation, or it contradicts having that discussion over a period of time to make it sure it is a meaningful decision. So that one, I would just say that we've got to kind of think through that to make sure we're not contradicting ourselves again there. I like the rotating through board members. And I've mentioned before that other districts, they actually have Ashley's got it here, the board report at the beginning. So it's actually heard. And if we do it on a rotational basis, then it makes it so it's not overwhelming the meeting and causing us to go long, which is what we're trying to not do. And I've all said before, but thank you, Ashley, for including this in here. I think that it is meaningful to add into our agenda a board committee report. And it's not, when I say that particularly, it's not just finance and the policy. It's all the committees that we have signed up for, and it doesn't necessarily mean we report every single time if there's not something to report, but at least we have a focus dedicated. We're going to talk about what we've been assigned to do. Let's see. I had another note. Okay. I think those are kind of my comments, is just making sure that as we are implementing a board structure, it doesn't contradict the actual intention that we're trying to accomplish, because some of these, it could cause that to occur. So I don't know how clear that was, but I can write it all down.
Annie, your hand has been up. You're done, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just, I wanted a little clarification. I'm in agreement with the first 4. I really think the time signature thing could help us. And I like the exceptions. For the expectation of reports with unanswered questions, could you give an example? Like if we had a 10-minute report on 5-minute report on, you know, assessment or a strategic plan report update or something, like, would we ask questions? Or what does that mean with unanswered questions? Like if we ask questions and if they're not answered ahead of time or in the meeting, what does that mean?
I guess an example I would give would be, you know, we had a recent report and it gave us a lot of information about nursing, but it didn't really comprehensively describe nursing. So I would think that you, for example, if I was to ask 5 follow-up questions to the presenter about nursing, rather than have the expectation that we're all going to have a very long conversation about school nurses right now, it would say, you know, okay, great, we're going to take those questions and we're going to bring that back for a future report, discussion, or study session, rather than go back and forth about something that certainly is part of the report but is not the primary purpose of the report. A different example would be, we have a report every year on the inclusion resolution. Sometimes people might ask a question about behavior units, which are a subset of special education. The report is not meant to be a comprehensive update on behavior units. It's meant to be a broad snapshot of the implementation of the inclusion resolution. So if, for example, a board member had a bunch of questions about the behavior unit, the superintendent may be able to direct staff, great, we're going to take all of these questions and we're going to suggest an agenda setting that we get back to a discussion item, study session, future report, whatever it may be on behavior units. And that way, the report conversation itself is not getting up to like 1 hour or more per report, which is what it has been when there are things that reports certainly bring up, but maybe we don't need to answer all of those questions in the meeting itself. That's what I mean by that.
And if we go that route, I think it would be helpful if we add that clarity so that that guidance is there to help move that along. Sorry, Annie.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so who would make that call, like board leadership or the superintendent or something? Of saying, okay, we're gonna.
In my opinion, I think there's 2 things. I mean, I think the same as the time signatures, which is the prior item for this, when I say that the chair should consider it normative, the chair can decide to do that. And because the chair, we don't always empower the chair actually to run the meeting. Because running the meeting does mean making those decisions, even if people are frustrated later and then they, you know, call you on the phone and let you have it and say, I don't know why you cut this report, so forth. But part of it is the chair could do this anytime. I'm saying if we all agreed it was normative, maybe it would empower the chair to do so. But same thing with unanswered questions. I think it's one of 2 things. Either the chair is certainly within the parameters of what it means to chair the meeting, to say, well, seeing that it's 6:54, we need to move on to blah, 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 whatever it is. And they could do that and then go on to say, superintendent, how would you feel about directing staff to, you know, get to these questions offline? The chair could definitely do that. The superintendent also, this is something that didn't quite make it into the very limited 1-pager here, but, you know, in certain situations, you do listen to a meeting where the superintendent responds first rather than always deferring to the presenter. And that, you know, thank you so much for these questions. We're actually going to recommend da-da-da-da-da-da. So I would say it's a combination of the chair and the superintendent who would have to do both of those things, in my experience.
Okay, that makes sense, thanks.
Alan.
Just reading through some of this, I think one of the issues is nobody really wants to volunteer to present at board meeting. So it's either a board member or board members have requested an item, or staff thinks that the board wants to hear this. So I think part of the conversation is what does come to board and board meetings as far as either reports or eventual decisions, and what doesn't. And maybe some of the issues is we're bringing too much for whatever reason, and we need to draw that line of, look, these are staff decisions, they don't need to go to board meetings, but these are board type items that do need to go to board meetings. Might help limit those agenda items.
Well, maybe you guys can help in that piece. I have appreciated what's come to the board and the discussions because it gives more perspective as to what's going on. But if you're feeling like it's crossing over into that's something that you feel is not necessarily what the board should be focusing on, then that conversation could be had, and sometimes people disagree and it needs to come regardless. That happens. But that insight could help. I know it's tricky though, because not everybody agrees, so you don't want to burn any bridges either.
I'm not sure that insight is heard very often when it's raised. It's the
Right.
board's meeting, and so the board can choose to do with the meeting what it wants.
Yeah, I want to go back to something with the reports agenda, and Amanda, this might be kind of what you were getting at with, feeling demeaned, or I can't remember the exact terminology that you used, but one of the things that I'm had some frustration with, and I'm noticing with the reports agenda, is we are sent the PowerPoints or things like that ahead of time. And I feel like often we're just getting a repeat of what has already been sent. And I actually think that's an efficiency piece. As board members, we are supposed to be reviewing those items ahead of time. And I feel like a lot of the time I am reviewing those, and then I'm getting like a second run through, and I'm thinking, well, why am I taking the time to review this ahead? Yeah, to read it when I'm just going to get this anyway. So I'm wondering if there's something that can be, I don't want the PowerPoint read to me verbatim, which I feel like has happened a few times. So I think that might,
Communicating that out to the presenters, like, hit the key points.
Yes.
But don't hit every single piece of it,
because I can't remember what
I think Annie's liking this. She's clapping and thumbs up.
because I remember there was one, and I don't think I'd even want to say it out loud, but there was a presentation where it was an hour and 20 minutes of repeating verbatim the
Hopefully
PowerPoint.
that hasn't, has that been recent?
That was a couple of months ago,
It was?
maybe 3 months ago.
With before board questions?
Yes.
yes. Every single element of the presentation, I remember it too.
But you have improved on
Let me
that.
There has been an
throw out
improvement, though.
An idea that we've done, and I don't know what you've thought of it. We've actually asked on a number of presentations that people put it in a memo and then just have 3, 4, or 5 slides.
I have seen
as a
improvement for
reminder.
sure.
And if your preference is toward that, then you have to, then more information is included, but it's in a memo, it's in narrative form, which is easier to read. I always find PowerPoints useless because they don't have the narrative behind them.
Right.
Right.
And I don't
What
mind the
that information-
PowerPoints.
Huh?
I think however they do it, it's fine. It's just more of how they just choose to,
Distribute the,
I've
Present
worked
the
to try and
information.
get presenters to do more narrative and then do PowerPoints as a reminder of a few of the hot salient things. Some of that has been frustrating to board members who like to have the board meeting be a message to the public rather
Yeah.
than just a meeting for the board to discuss, and that's a tough trade-off.
That's a balancing act.
oh, and making
I
sure
see
it's
Annie has
quality
raised her
information.
hand again also.
Oh, Bryce.
Yes, but Bryce was
So let
finishing,
me-
yeah. I saw Annie's, but Bryce, you're finishing.
I was going to say that there's definitely been an improvement. I've seen it. I think just the couple that have continued have kind of maybe
Yes.
put a cloud over the efforts or the improvements that have been made.
But do you, as a board, do you prefer the more narrative-driven presentation with only a handful of slides rather than a slide-heavy presentation that we go through during the meeting?
Personally, yes.
Well, and mine's kind of a
Annie
mix.
It's now, let me,
You're asking the question, but yeah, Annie can go.
okay, yeah. Annie?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't really think it matters to me, in my personal opinion, the
Delivery method.
mode of presentation, like whether it's a memo or a slideshow. I think what matters is that it's like highlighting the 3 things that the board needs to know for the budget and for the policy decisions that we're making. I think sometimes what ends up happening is we get a lot of information, which is helpful sometimes for us individually to have context or for the public, but in the end, we still are left without the bottom line information, which is like, so what do we need to know? Like, how much is this costing us, or what are the actual data, the metrics, like what is, so from my perspective, it's not necessarily super helpful for it to be this long narrative per se, but more of like, this is the information you need to know, like, this legislation changed, we changed our practices, this is the outcome, we've measured the outcome, it's costing us XYZ, and you need to know that because in the upcoming budget, you know what I mean? Just tying it to actually what's useful for the board's decision-making.
Thank you.
Amanda, and then I had a comment.
Yeah, and to, same on Annie's thing, and I honestly think for the board and for the public, a detailed upload of what the information is all about is very helpful, especially is ensuring it's clear and accurate so that, because many times as a public constituent before I was on the board and knowing others, there was a lot of times where you're being fed bad information. And it may not be intentional, it may just be incomplete, which implies that it's bad information. So I think going too simple on the information being provided, not necessarily presented, and what I mean is verbally explained to us, that what is being provided in the exhibits should be quality, meaningful, clear, understandable information aligned with whatever the presentation is, and then the presenters, again, hit the key points without telling us what we've already gone through and the public can review. Because, and I've emphasized this many a times, it's most important to me to ensure the public feels like the information being provided, the public, the teachers, the families, the students feel like the information being provided is truly representative as to what is happening, whether it's a dollar, whether it's a program, whether it's a participation piece, whether it's, you name it. If it's not being presented in a way that it's representing what's actually happening, that's where the distrust occurs.
It would be worth talking with you more and understanding that better.
Sure.
Because I'm curious about that. There is never an intention to leave the board short or to provide information that's bad. Nobody's trying to pull anything over on you.
Yeah, I don't think the intent is ever there.
So I'd like to understand what you think is happening
Yeah,
there and get a better sense of that.
I'll use Alan as an example outside of this meeting.
There you go. So, and the other piece, and I'm going to mention it again, because I think when we're preparing presentations, we do not prepare them for the public. We prepare them for the audience of the board.
True, but
We are bringing you information relevant to the board as we see either the agenda item is because it's required and we're reporting out, or we're bringing you things. We're not trying to explain the world so that the community understands it. We're trying to explain it so the board understands it. So we're presuming a certain knowledge base that the board has, typically in a lot of that. I think that's important, and I'm not sure that I want to prepare communications for the community.
I think generally the
That way.
communications have been good. I think what really gets back to what Bryce was saying is when I have all this and I sit here and read it verbatim, I like that I got this.
I agree.
But I don't want this read to me
Yes,
verbatim.
I look askance at that too, I want you to know, and we have, yeah, I agree.
And I think that you have worked on that. I mean, I have seen some of that. My thought about this is, okay, you get the presentation, excuse me, whether it's in a PowerPoint or a memo. I think that it's important to have that piece there, but I, and others have suggested this, so then there maybe are 3 additional slides or an additional, okay, these are the takeaways. These are the things that you need to understand. Do you understand these things? And for me, if you have that, then what you can do, because I do this sometimes, I will say, will you please pull up, and I did that to Alan, just the last time. Please pull up the slide that shows yada, yada, yada. And I need that so that he can understand what it is that I'm asking him. And there are times when, I've called Alan and said, okay, I have a question or whatever, and Alan, answers my question, and I'm fine. But there are times when I'll say to Alan, okay, thank you for that explanation, but I am going to ask you that question because I want the public to hear what his answer is, because I think it's an important point. So for me, I really appreciate that we're trying to figure out how to, okay, we're not going to go through the thing verbatim or whatever. We're all responsible board members. We will have done our homework. We know what's in there. But yes, I would appreciate having whatever the 5 takeaways or whatever they are, that, okay, do you understand these things? And I can look at that and I can go, oh yeah, I do, but oh, you know what? I didn't pick up on that. So now I've got a couple of questions. Thank you for illuminating me on this or whatever. That's, for me, that would be a good way to do this. Ashley, you?
I was just going to say, we have about 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
So instead of going from the top down, I'm going to go from the bottom up and just say a little bit about what I heard, which is the last one is try to adopt a positive board member report that rotates at the beginning of the meeting and change board member reports. Well, they would still say board member reports because, as Amanda's pointed out, we're on multiple committees. So we would give a report for our applicable committees, if at all. It sounded like people didn't object to that. Yeah.
At the end of the meeting?
Yeah. It sounds like people did not object to that, but Charlotte has something
Just
to say.
clarify. So you said rotate through?
Yeah.
Would it be 1 board member per meeting, or are you thinking 3, or
I
whatever
think
we
so.
decide?
What do you think would be the best?
There are 7 of us, so
Maybe 2 per meeting so that we're not dealing with just 1 per year.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay, people want to try that, and then same thing, maybe we try it until, November or whatever. And then people can say, oh, actually, blah, 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 blah. Okay.
The board member report that maybe has 2, that's at the beginning, towards the beginning.
And we can
Or
just
the
start,
committee reports are at the end.
and we can just start with on 1 and 7 or something. You know what I mean? And go
Yeah, that makes
inward.
sense. Okay, Ashley, I
Okay.
just want to, Ashley, if I could just interrupt for 1 minute, because I thought that you had something that you wanted to add to what we were, so I want to add one more thing
Yeah,
in
go
my
ahead.
comments, and that is, when it's talking about the time signature piece, I appreciate that, because I think that what that helps us do is really be conscientious about what we're doing. And it helps me as a board member think, you know what? I think I can probably get that answer myself. I can call later or whatever. And to me, I think the thing that would happen would be, yeah, the first couple of board meetings, this would be hard because people are going, oh my gosh, I'm not used to this or whatever. But I think that what it would do is it would help us self-monitor. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. Well, I think it could go broader than that. But anyway, but then the other thing that it does too is it helps the people, the staff that are making the reports and stuff be, and I'm not saying that they're not prepared. I think they are prepared, and I think that they have put together, what we need to hear. But I think that it would also help them be thinking, oh my gosh, if I don't have this report streamlined, it's going to make it so that the other staff member that is coming after me might not get to do theirs. Do you see what I'm saying? It's going to make them think, okay, I've got to be really conscientious in what I'm doing with my report, because it also impacts the other staff. To me, it's a way that it helps the board self-monitor, but it also helps the staff self-monitor, if that's making sense at all.
Well, and I
Bryce?
think kind of on that, sorry, is just
Okay.
we should put a time limit on the staff and then we have the time markers for ourselves, because if we don't do that, then we risk the staff over speaking.
The only other piece I was going to say about the timestamp, and forgot to say it in my original comments, is that actually helps the public that are looking for particular things, give them like, hey, you should tune in maybe this particular time. I've had a number of folks being like, well, what time do you think you're going to cover this? And I'm like, you're going to have to watch the whole meeting, I'm sorry, or come back and watch it later.
And so
Yeah.
to bring it back, knowing we have 3 minutes left, I'd respond to Charlotte's question that on this agenda today, for example, it has times for every item in the work session. So in the past, it typically was not like line by line times. It's more like the reports agenda has a time, but the discussion agenda has a time. And so by the time that the reports agenda has elapsed, you say it has lapsed. So I don't want these 2 minutes to lapse. So I would just say for that fourth item on the list, it seems like people are amenable to placing time signatures on the agenda, but Amanda requested specifically additional qualifiers guide that, including if it impacted a very specific student or group of students, if it was a legal matter, or if there was anything that seemed urgent for any reason, knowing that there, as Brian pointed out, there would be some growing pains to that. So do people have any other objections to putting times on the next, 4 or 5 months of agendas and seeing if there's any improvement?
Say we give it a go, and if you can work with your staff on their presentation and how that they play into that, so we can allow us to have our ability to talk.
Yeah, and to that end, the fifth item says, have this expectation for reports with unanswered questions, that we sort of try to punt some of those questions to limit our reports time. This, of course, is not something that we can really just do. It's a self-monitoring issue on some level. So do people have any additional things about that other than we don't want it to contradict that we need to talk about things a certain number of times, but we acknowledge our reports are commonly overlong, and maybe we try to mull that over and take it up again in the future.
Because I think our reports almost are treated like discussions.
Yeah.
Where we try to streamline them before it gets to discussion. That's where it gets heavier.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, that means that if we meet the time, like the time runs out and there are unanswered questions, is that what you mean? That they be considered for future?
I just think the example I gave is when we have a lot of questions that are brought up by a report that are not the main focus of the report. So like the nursing example or the, what other example did I use? Nursing, something else.
So
I don't
just
remember.
something off topic?
Or behavior
questions?
units. No, they're related, but they could be a
related.
future discussion. And so you say, I have these 10 questions about nurses, and I'm going to ask them to you now, but I hope, Superintendent, that we can schedule that for a future item,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And because that's self-monitoring, it seems like
Well, that's a
we,
self-monitoring thing.
I kind of think so. Or, because there's no other way, other than if you have some ideas for board police. If there's any board police. But with our last, 10 seconds here, the first three are also self-monitoring. And different things have been brought up, like the leadership, superintendent, and BA would remain mindful of this desire. And as Alan pointed out, that's going to require them to focus on what actually is supposed to come to the board and what's not. That staff do this. We had a good conversation about staff, how you can't bury the lead by trying to make it efficient. We have to make it more clear and less vague in the name of efficiency rather than limit the amount of information. And that we've given some feedback that there's, the memo format and the PowerPoint format are not so much the issue as the length of time of the question and answer period,
And
maybe.
words I put in there with your concise would be concise, accurate, and informative.
Yeah.
Maybe that kind of like envelopes, what would be helpful?
And then and the last would be, the board is mindful that we're sending our questions in advance to also help guide this. So is there any objection to any of those three things just being, hey, remember this, and these are the discussions we've
Can we add
had?
on that questions in advance? Can we add on there that the response is sent back to the whole board just automatically? Because obviously sometimes you're seeing a theme, and so like the TELP, you notified all of us, but I still think it would be very helpful to know what questions are circulating to help us all kind of go into that meeting aware of like things that maybe we weren't even thinking about, or getting a gauge on where each person's brain is as we're gearing up. So if that could be an automatic BCC, the whole group, when you're responding and providing information,
I would suggest,
dialoguing for information.
I changed a little bit about what you said, writing my notes, so we can do a follow-up to this. And I just said responses are sent back to the full board when possible. And the reason for that would be if I send all my questions on Wednesday night or Thursday morning, then you assume Alan's received some, Liz has received some. They are sending an email then, BCCing everybody on Friday. People haven't even gone through the agenda yet. Then they get someone else's on Friday, and someone else's on Saturday, and someone else's on Sunday. So I would say send things back to the full board when possible, and kind of take some time and think about how to adapt that practice.
And I would say if we're doing that, it should be the norm of, if you have a follow-up question, don't BCC the whole board.
Yeah.
We'll BCC on the responses, but just to avoid all that back
Yeah,
and forth.
thank you. That was my concern.
So we're 3 minutes over, so I want to end. It sounds like there's not more objection to doing that, although there's some more kind of nuance about what it might mean. So do we need to, I don't know that we need to bookmark an exact time to talk about this, because, you know, as you've pointed out, in January, things change. So I think very loosely between now and November, we take some of these practices under advisement. We send like an email follow-up from this retreat about what was discussed, and then choose, you know, after the election or a new board is seated, what to revisit and what not, if that sounds good.
I think that makes very good sense.
And as we're gearing up and doing that, I would ask that we consider not stating doing shorter agendas, but basically emphasizing efficient agendas, which could result in shorter, because I like the problem that I've had with the time thing is then we're more focused on the clock instead of the work. So if we focus on efficient, then we might still accomplish the end without going, oh, it's too long. Which the timing and all of that will resolve it, should resolve it. So it's a thought.
Okay. Alan?
And I also suggest that board members go through kind of past agendas. I mean, the example I'm going to throw out there is the construction update. We're not going to do any board action on that. That's just informative. And we talked about before, could this be an email and not an agenda item? And it was the preference of the board that it maintain an agenda item. But look at those things that aren't leading to any action and say, well, we could move this to an email. If it's information that you want the public to say, we could post it on, I mean, the construction updates could go on our construction webpage so that information's out there. But just maybe review, are there other items that have crept into the agendas over the years that could maybe be better served as an email?
I think that that's a really wise observation. The addition to that, though, too, because when we're talking about these agendas, we just made, and it was in the consent agenda, that now there will be a budget report, you know, in all. So to me, that's going to take time. So it means that what we're talking about here really is pertinent, because we have all agreed that that budget update, I think was the word, I don't remember exactly, but in order to accommodate that, we need to be observing some of this, well, not some, all of what we just talked about. Okay. And to me, I guess I kind of think this meeting has really, for me, been an example of how you can do a time signature thing. I mean, yeah, we've run into problems where, but I was trying to say, okay, you guys, we're 5 minutes over. Okay, you guys, it's 10 minutes. And I think that it helped people start thinking, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to have to solve this instead of just having it be, well, okay, we're now going to be, yeah, it's now our meeting, we're not going to get out at 8. We're going to get out at 8. I mean, that's what you start thinking in the back of your mind. But I think that people have been kind of thinking, okay, you know what, we're really trying to stick to that 8 o'clock thing. Okay.
And board goals.
That's right. Board goals. So I had Helen make a copy of this and send this out to you. Okay, where did I find this? I found this on the district website. So you go to the district website, you click on board, and then an easy way that you can find it is you type in board goals and then it pulls it up. Okay. And there are like pictures that go along. We didn't need all of that, but this is what we have said our board goals are. Okay. We have heard from board members that maybe we need to do some thought on these board goals. I don't know if we think that we need to change our board goals. I am sharing with you that we have 3 board goals: reading, pathways, and absenteeism. Where are we as a board on these goals? It's open to you. Charlotte, you were, okay.
Okay, I mean, all 3 of them have a date where you want this proficiency, you want the goal to be realized by 2029. So I don't think we should, these have not been attained yet. It's not 2029 yet. So either we tweak them a little bit or we add more goals, but I don't think that's wise.
Thank you,
add goals.
Charlotte. That's what I wanted to hear, but okay. But that's just me, Bryce. Oh, and then Amanda. Okay.
Yeah, were you before?
Go ahead.
I'm similar to Charlotte. I don't know that I would want to completely reinvent the wheel, and I think keeping it to 2 or 3 is helpful in, moving things forward and not getting consumed with a lot. But maybe some tweaks. I'm open to that, but no, right now, no major overhaul.
So mine would be tweaking. One, we have the the legislative bill that said that by 2030, we have to have 80% of students reading on grade level by the end of 3rd grade, and then the retention piece. So I would request that we change the literacy goal to align with that higher bar than what our current goal is situated at. And then just a feedback piece, I guess they roughly correlate, but I've got this Salt Lake City School District Priorities 25-26, which is the goals.
Right, that's the printout, and the verbiage does not match.
Does not match.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you're pulling that off the website, this thing that was given to me last year does not tie out perfectly. So just FYI, that's odd.
Yeah, we need to figure that out.
I don't have any concerns with the pathways one. I still really love that it's 100% of students, so there's emphasis on ensuring our students with disabilities and different abilities and such are also looped in that goal as well. And then, like I've spoken before in meetings about truancy, the priority for the board has been to reduce chronic absenteeism. But we all know that chronic absenteeism does not include truancy. Am I saying that right? So actually, instead of having it be worded as reduce chronic absenteeism, we should, in my opinion, change it to reduce absenteeism. So it aligns with my thing that I've been pushing is if we're focusing on our chronic absenteeism students that have excuses, but we're not making it a board priority to focus on our truant students who do not have excuses for being absent.
So the chronic absenteeism is anybody who has missed 10% of the days. That's the kind of the national sense of what chronic absenteeism, whether they're excused or unexcused. So that's the umbrella term. Truancy is just for those who are unexcused. So we went with chronic absenteeism because just missing that much school is problematic, whether you're excused or not. There's a downside to that. The truant is the one who's unexcused. So it's a subset of.
And I think the part
that's its own issues behind it, but
I've struggled with is there in the presentations, there has been a need to continue to re-explain how those are differentiated. And then in the strategic plan, until recently, it was.
that still hasn't been approved. We were going to bring that back in another discussion.
Okay, but basically in there, it was using the terminology of chronic absenteeism, which even though the technical breakdown of it is, as you say, it implies for me, it implies it's the students that that are excused. It doesn't intentionally have the language to focus on our truant students, which we have is a whole other slew of issues that actually can be wrapped into students that need help to help re-engage them into academics. So that's where I feel it's important to go back and change it to just reduce absenteeism. And then within the clarification elements of it, there is the truancy efforts, and then there's the chronic absenteeism efforts. There is an overlay there, but then it's the same thing I talk about we serve all of our students. Well, what does that actually mean? Because there are so many different subgroups, and how you work with each of these subgroups is different. So if we're not intentionally talking about those different subgroups of students and how we're going to intentionally help them with their education or whatever it is, they get lost in that conversation. So that's my thing. I've always been hung up on this chronic absenteeism goal.
Yeah, it is kind of the way to talk about absenteeism these days. I mean, it is kind of the common term for discussing it nationally, yeah. And then there's good research that says when you hit that 10%, it really starts to affect outcomes for kids and their performance and all.
Oh, absolutely. I don't want to eliminate it. I just want clarification in
Well,
it.
the other piece is that I think there's a difference between a goal and the way the schools manage attendance. The schools aren't just responding to chronic. I mean, they're looking at all of the absenteeism, and they're worried about any kid that's missing too much. And they're responding based on what their notions are of what the child needs. This child needs a home visit. This child just needs to show up for school, and I need to talk to their parents and make sure they're here on time. Or that's how schools navigate it. They don't navigate it based on our language that says truant versus chronically absent.
They're handling all the
They deal it
students.
by kid so that it's.
100%, and I'm sure none of that's going to change. I just want the goal to clarify that
But I think
expectation.
if you do that, then you become so particular in your goals. I think,
Are you? Because you're just saying absenteeism.
well, I don't care if they're absent 5 times. I only care if they're absent 19 times. So do you really want to do absenteeism, or is there a certain threshold by which we say, this is so worrisome that we need to stop it? And I would suggest there are enough kids that are in that so worrisome category that it's sufficient for us to spend our efforts trying to drop even the measure of chronically absent, which includes truancy.
I wouldn't want to drop it by any stretch.
Yeah, so that's why there's kind of, it creates
hear
for
you.
us a natural benchmark that focuses our attention in ways.
I hear you.
Okay.
I'm wondering, because I understand what you're saying, if a student misses 4 times, it doesn't matter. Am I right that if you are truant, you are chronically absent, but not all chronically absent students are truant?
Right.
So what you're trying to say is this includes truant students, but because it doesn't name it, and truancy is such a different thing, and we have had a conversation about bolstering our truancy referrals and actually doing what we have the power to do, would it be reasonable to amend the goal to say working to reduce chronic absenteeism, including truancy, and then leaving everything else as it is and adding one bullet about training school leaders on revised truancy practices, which is something we've talked about? Would that be reasonable?
Yes, let's look at the language on that, because then it
Yeah.
says, yes to the whole thing, but the language
Salt Lake
would
City School
say
District is working to
Yeah.
reduce chronic absenteeism, which includes truancy.
Yeah.
to, and then comma, to, it still makes sense, does it, to say, reduce chronic absenteeism, comma, including truancy.
That's what I would say.
Comma, from 28 to 10.
Yeah.
But then from
Or I mean, even just at the bottom, because up here, this is your big picture goal. That's what you want to do. Down here, Salt Lake City School District is working to reduce chronic absenteeism, comma, including truancy. And then adding a bullet on training about truancy, which is what some of us have advocated for.
Okay, let's do that. I'm going to actually, this language in here is, I think, has been written for the layperson to understand the goal, rather than actual topics.
I was gonna say, because I was reading through it, I'm like,
Yeah.
what's happening here?
And it does not
I
matter.
would prefer to take the priority language and
Yeah.
add that particular bullet in, because then it makes it something that we're holding ourselves to a little bit more. And then I think that should go on the website, if that's okay, and we remove this more
Yeah,
general.
get rid of redundant stuff that
Yes.
appears to be
I
conflicting.
didn't realize that this was how it was written up there.
Yeah, and that speaks to, I think it seems like most people agree that that would address what Amanda is saying, but also not change the goal too much, because
Yeah.
Charlotte pointed out, we don't actually want to change goals before we've had time to measure them.
Right.
And we just approved a new attendance tool and so forth.
So then
And
we don't need a
Clarifying
board
it.
vote, because it's just a sub-bullet, not the actual goal isn't really changing.
I would think so. I think it would be reasonable to place a memo on consent or via email that informs us of how it was changed to respond to the discussion.
Yeah.
But don't we need to do
Okay,
some, what
let's
do we
do
need to
that.
do to change the literacy goal? Because are we in, what's
Yeah.
everybody's thought on that one? We need to change it, right?
And literacy is one I wanted to talk about, just the way it's written here, which, as you're saying, is perhaps wrong when compared.
Of the sub-language.
Well, I just think, like, if you look at bullet point 2, and I'll talk about one on literacy and one on careers, and then people can say what they think. On literacy, on bullet 2, we give extra help early to students who struggle with reading. I think it's our land trust predominantly that's doing that, so schools are choosing to do that rather than we are providing that. We're not always providing early intervention. Our SCCs are investing in early intervention. And then, the third bullet, we invest in effective methods like letters. We aren't seeing our scores going up, and I understand we're obligated to use letters for whatever duration of time we are, but we now have a full cohort of letters-trained teachers, and the scores are unchanged. And I have varying opinions about standardized tests, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, if these are the things that we're doing, it would be helpful if our pillar updates, in addition to changing this to align with what the governor said, that we don't say things that we're not doing, or we don't, if we purport that something's an effective reading method, that the information the board receives would show that too.
Let me, I would like to amend all of this sub-language next
Yeah.
to these goals. We've been using that priorities document
Yeah.
with staff and have said to them, these are going to be the priorities for 26, 27 as well. We can make these
Yeah.
amendments to it. I'd rather use that document to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and wouldn't it actually be priorities for, like, up to 2029, since the board goals are
Yeah.
for up to 2029?
As is the strategic plan.
Well, yes and no.
Oh, they're
I
in
mean,
our-
they're
they're in
yearly.
our-
They're yearly, and
So we could change it at any point, but right now, the major
And-
target. So you have the priorities per year, but then the major target is the 2029.
And so acknowledging we're going to be looking at that document instead of this one is what we have right now. So I'm just going to say the other thing I noted on it, which is the under career and college pathway. Just in personal experience, I had to beg to get a CCR. And so I know there are a lot of students who probably didn't have a CCR. And I know there are varying reasons for that. And, I'm not levying blame at any individual or department, but this is an example of what I think Amanda is raising sometimes, where it's like the information we get or the information we put out doesn't always line up with reality. And another example of that would be, that we, like in that CCR, the question was posed like, oh, what kind of job are you interested in? And the answer was umpire. And you could watch the person just kind of like, there's nothing in this binder for you.
Your child?
Yeah, one of them, the one who follows rules said that. So I think the point being, we say these things, but we don't always fill in a complete picture of what that can mean. And that a career or college pathway, we focus so heavily on the career pathways that unfortunately college pathways seem to have been left behind for many students in those meetings if they can get into them. And to that end, this first bullet is another one that speaks to kind of where people get bristly about information. It says we're going to offer more career and technical education CTE programs. But we hear in the public comment section of our meetings regularly that in fact programs are being cut, or I'll go to an event and hear the CNA program is no longer happening. I've been waiting for that, this whole time. Now it's my senior year and I have to totally switch what I'm doing to medical assisting. And maybe I got that reversed, but things like that where we hear, in fact, about programs we are cutting. So to see that we're presenting to the public, we're offering more, is not really that we're offering more. I understand that you are trying to be more strategic about what we offer to focus on viable careers in specific industries. So it seems like more than adjust the goal, I think these goals are good. I think the language being presented around the goals should perhaps be more direct and clear. And I think that,
If you look at your thing
Yeah.
in your folder.
right. Yes, and I guess I'm saying this is because this is what we've been given, but it's also what's on the internet, right? So it
That's
speaks
why I
to
used it.
more than me wanting us to amend it. I'm posing that, Amanda said, hey, when people hear something in a meeting and they think that's not true, then they point to this. Well, on your website, it says you're offering more CTE programs, and in fact, you cut this program and this program and this program, which are the ones I wanted. Answer for yourself. And so I'm just suggesting, I think our goals are good I support what Amanda's asking for, which is adding something about truancy and truancy training to chronic absenteeism, and also amending the percentage for literacy to reflect state priorities. Annie supports this, if anyone cares. And,
Annie's got her hand up, too.
and then just taking a look at the language that we are putting out to the community and making sure it's accurate.
Thank you. Let me, as a follow-up, I will edit the priorities document and send it your way before it goes out to staff. And make sure that captures it correctly.
And you're going to send along what you put in there, Ashley, those adjustments?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, all right. So Annie,
Yeah. I was just going to say, I agree. My main concern with this, I'm new, obviously, so I don't know the full history of what past board goals were. But to me, it seems like we have a limited, obviously we have an important governance role in terms of allocating resources and making sure policies are in place and all the things to support the goals. But I do feel like, kind of as Ashley alluded to, it seems a little disingenuous to have like a really broad, lofty goal that doesn't seem like we can actually fully control, or maybe is sounding better than what is the actual reality. So that's kind of just my thing, is just making sure that, especially I guess in the language as we're adjusting it, that it's specific enough that
Measured?
But, yeah, but measured, in the sense that it's not like we're going to say, yeah, the board's gonna just, knock it out of the park, and everyone's gonna, be at school 100% of the time. I just think sometimes it seems a little, I don't know, lofty.
When I first joined the board, they were called board goals, and then we saw these district priorities, and I was like, well, are these board goals or are these district goals? What is this? So it was a little confusing to me.
Isn't it the 3 board goals, aren't they subtitled there? What's the,
It is listed as goals, and then you have the priorities, and then you have the strategic plan. But that's what Annalise is working on, is coming up with that document that ties all of it all together, instead of us having all these separate documents that.
well, I'll tell you the history behind this if you're interested.
Portrait of a graduate?
Yeah, that's actually another piece. But, so when I arrived, we had a strategic plan that had 39 different things we were doing.
Yeah, and I had a big problem with that.
Yes.
As a teacher.
As a strategic plan, it's not very strategic. So, and the board was the one that asked for this. They wanted board goals, and they wanted a subset. So we pulled a subset, essentially, from the strategic plan. And that's what these top 3 are, which are the right goals. I mean, I think they are the right thing to be spending our time and resources on. I think they're very good. And I put it in a document along with my interest, and this went out to the staff to say, not only are we going to work on these board goals, and we can change the language, we should change that to say board goals, to clarify, but also to say we're going to change the culture of the way we do things around here, because I perceived an unhealthy culture in the district in a number of ways. And so was trying to capture that in this fortifying the organizational foundation, that we work on good governance goals as well about how we do things. So in ways, this was groundbreaking in that, as principal said, they've never had direction like this before, for a long time. So it was useful to have. I think that's right. We should change the language around the 3 board goals particularly, so it's clear those are board goals, board approved, board directed.
Board approved.
Yeah.
Well, I
And things that, those are our primary goals, as well as all the strategic plan stuff that we're still all working on. But
I know I said just modify, but I also am curious about a communication one, because I feel like communication seems to be a consistent issue throughout the district.
it's on our strategic plan.
Under what? Oh, true. So it's maybe not a board goal, but it's in the strategic plan?
Yeah. Pillar 3.
I think I'm just echoing what Annie said, that these seem more like district goals. But I don't know.
They're the goals the board has for the district.
Okay.
They're not goals for the board to take on about
Right.
actions or things. Yeah, they are.
And did the board vote on, a past board voted on these 3? Okay.
The goal to, and maybe it's worth following up, just a question with Annie. So particularly since Amanda said the state has raised the bar on what they expect for literacy, 80% by 2030. We're currently below 40%. The goal of 70% is lofty. So we can raise it to be in line with the state. It would just be even more lofty. So I honestly don't know what to do with that. I like having a lofty goal for literacy, and I actually wanted to mention too, as you were talking about this literacy in the work, particularly Ashley, you were mentioning the work. we're putting together a plan right now of how we want to structure literacy in the district going forward, given Senate Bill 241, which will retain students in third grade.
Yeah.
As I've spoken to staff, I keep trying to reiterate that it's going to require, in order, first, I think we should be the flagship district on that single piece of data alone. I want to have the fewest kids possible held back in third grade. It's not good to hold kids back in third grade. And I want to have as few as we possibly can held back then. So we need to structure the district. We need to put in resources. We need to structure the time in the day in elementary schools, pre-K through 3, so that that is the goal. Otherwise, we're not going to make it. So I want to come to the board with what we're planning in all the different ways we'd like to structure a literacy initiative to meet that expectation. Probably, if we can fit it in August, we'd have to look at what we've got set up already and things. But to come present to you some ideas on where we're going with that.
And just a thought, if you guys are already, you may very well, but part of that contributor, in my opinion, to third grade proficiency is early identification of like dyslexia or other disabilities, so that they can get early interventions in place to help them. Because I've got, again, I'll use my kids as an example. I think I've got a kid, give about every example known to man. But the one, and this was partly, I guess, my fault, in that there was something there, it wasn't clear enough, nobody was asking to get her assessed, and it wasn't standing up to a point that it was detrimental, but it took till her fourth grade teacher that really dug in and figured out how to teach to her that she blossomed. So if she was assessed by her third grade levels, she would have been held back, and erroneously, because today she's doing all sorts of amazing things. But being held back based on something that wasn't, that support structure wasn't in place for her for various reasons, not just because of an identification of her challenges. Early on, it's just harmful. So anyway, as you're looking at those ideas and those proposals, I think that has to be very much a piece of it. And I know the dyslexia community has really been working hard legislatively to do so.
Pilot this year, that they're piloting the dyslexia identification.
Yeah, these people
Yep.
in the schools could sign up for it for sure, but they've been working really hard at that early. And that's not the only disability that could benefit from an early identification. So anyway.
So glad to hear that. Do you know what I heard one time as a teacher? And this was from a special ed. There's no such thing as dyslexia. It was
Really?
going, we got a problem here.
Really? I've never heard that.
Yeah,
God, I've not heard that.
yeah. So,
Can I
Okay.
go back just to ask that 70% versus 80%? Some thoughts on that?
Ashley?
I would tend to agree normally that establishing an artificially lofty goal is not useful. I think in this situation, we're going to have to make it 80% this year or next year. And so we may as well just say 80% by 2030, because that is the expectation that's been set forth for us. So let's not fight it, and instead, let's concentrate on.
Well, if we shoot for 2029, then we're hopefully ahead of the game.
Yeah, and it is, I mean, the thing I do think is problematic that none of this will solve is that as we strive to increase that number, we do a bunch of things just to increase the number that actually contribute a lot to this other problem of absenteeism, because I don't want to go to school when all we do is get intervened upon hour after hour after hour. And the schools whose scores are fine do additional fine arts. They do additional PEs per day. They have an earlier out at different times. They do more assemblies. They take more field trips, and that all those things are not directly evidence-based contributors to literacy, but they are what we don't do. So I would say that we have to make it say whatever, the governor has said it has to say, which is 80%. And what I'd like to see us focus on is ways to get to 80% that are not only intervene upon kids, making school more painful and boring and terrible.
One son that they focused on literacy, starting heavy, hardcore in first grade. That was their primary purpose, even though they had to do all these other things. And then my one that struggled was the one that she got a first grade teacher that was trying to help have the kids master everything. So she failed everything. So I think it's that like early education with these students, and what is the priority? Is our priority having our kids be experts in everything early on, or become experts in the things that help us become successful in everything later on?
I do think trying to meet this goal, it necessarily has to reshape how we think about what we're doing, and it'll require that of teachers too, to rethink. And I think it'll be very hard for some teachers to say, I do have to give up all these things that I think are really beneficial in keeping kids here. And maybe there is a trade-off that we're going to have in this that is a tough one to think about. And how we minimize the consequences of doing a lot of good around literacy. How can we minimize the consequences?
But you can integrate literacy into everything. That's the thing.
Then it won't be on the recording.
I'll do that. Thanks for the reminder,
I would
Al.
offer something
Okay,
about that.
Ashley.
I think that it is, just thinking about, there's two ways to get to the increased score. And something I've observed, because obviously I teach kids most days of the week. And if I have provided them with like a 4-paragraph passage, I won't tell you the whole story, although I'm happy to tell you offline all of the formative assessment I've been lightly doing. But kids are not getting past the 3rd paragraph of a new thing, and it's not because they can't read it. I can listen to them, they can read it aloud to me, they can tell me everything it says, but it is declining to continue reading. And I guess I just don't know that a lot of the strategies we are using, which involve reading non-novel passages of interest to no one, insofar as I can tell, is helping, and then testing them on reading those things. Because if you tested a student on a 4-paragraph thing I gave, and I know they can only answer questions about the first 2 paragraphs, and it's not really a literacy issue, it's a stamina issue.
A real problem with stamina.
And I just don't know the way you build the stamina is by providing more interventions with boring passages. So I do just think there's a lot of work to be done, but it doesn't mean you won't. I wouldn't think there has to be a trade-off. It's a different pathway to get to the score you'd like to see. Because we see kids with very successful literacy scores, and it has a lot to do with the many wide varieties of activities that they're allowed to do in and out of school, compared with students at predominantly Title I schools whose experience is much more restricted by academic intervention. And I think that's frustrating. But it seems like people have expressed support for making it 80%, whether we like it or not. Is that true?
We don't have the choice of the matter, but we need to start working towards it.
And then you're sending us the revisions to the priorities document, and then we're looking at if there's anything else we want to change. And then looking at what's on the website.
That 80% is just for 3rd grade, isn't it?
It is just for 3rd grade, so we should think about that too. I wanted that with this 8th and 10th on there as well.
Do you really want to aim for 80% for 3rd grade?
I know, it's a little hard.
And then expect that you'll reduce over
Why
time.
NCLB was 100% of students will be proficient.
What was that?
Because nobody
No
wanted
child
to
left
say, no child left behind.
They
The
didn't wanna
federal
leave
law
any-
was that mandated that schools hit 100% proficiency, or they'd take away money. And so then, nobody wanted to say, oh, only 90% of your children need to be proficient, right? It's a very difficult thing to be
Yeah.
realistic on that. So they actually had to figure out how not to take away money from states because it was in the law.
If a student is, let's say, if we have 80% of our students proficient at third grade, what's the likelihood that that's going to decline over time?
Very small.
So if we get them to 80%, then we should be able to hopefully maintain roughly around that for the 8th and 10th grade that are also encompassed in this major target. So that's not an unreasonable correlation, it's just a very
Hitting
lofty
80%
goal.
will be tough, but we really do have to do it by third grade or they have to be retained. There are some caveats that allow a board to say, no, this kid's new in the country, that's not fair to hold them back, or, yeah, they have a disability that holding them back's not going to help, da-da-da-da-da. So there are some ways to limit that, but not completely.
Yeah, but so your whole effort to create a system that will promote that 80%, yes, that will accommodate that governmental requirement, but it will also be reflected later, because if they achieve that, that brings us closer to the overall 80%, because they're not going to drop after they've reached their, it's a lot easier to maintain them once you get them there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that we have had a really successful board retreat, just because we're going to get out. I will be able to adjourn
Just because.
us.
I had a very hearty, productive conversation.
Well, I was going to say, but in addition, I think we had a very productive conversation. Charlotte?
Well, we didn't quite finish our board norms.
You're right, we have those 2 additional, and I thought about that, but I thought, I really want us to be able to
That as
adjourn.
well.
Yeah.
So we'll put a pin in those 2.
Which ones are the 2 left over?
They were,
Were there any others? Or, I mean, you did the 3 here.
Right.
We skipped some in the middle we had implemented, basically, to try to get to the ones that we were mostly considering changing. So I guess the question would be, is there something on a list that you feel we didn't talk about that we should bookmark for the next time?
Well, I
Yeah.
thought that, I guess I'm not quite understanding. It seems that most of our board norms are around our meetings, but there could be some about communication or about the chain of, going through the chain of leadership, making sure we're not circumventing the superintendent when we're talking to stakeholders. I don't know, things like that.
oh, okay.
Well, a lot of that's in the board handbook already.
Oh, but they're not called board norms.
Right. But we
Okay.
won't need it in 2 places.
True.
The norms are things that, from our last discussion, that if something's in the handbook, then it's in the handbook, it's the rule. That's the
rule.
expectation. Whereas something like, you will have time signatures on every meeting. That is something that we're talking about as a normative practice that we wouldn't put in the handbook because maybe there's some instance in which we don't. It's so you don't screw it down too tight.
Or is it, maybe I understood that different boards want to function differently.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
those things that
Yeah.
can be changed.
That's why this one was named Guiding Practices and Preferences
Oh,
as
yeah.
a way to describe what the norms in this setting would be for this board.
Okay.
Kind of thing.
All right.
That's why that choice was made by the board as it looked at this in 2025.
Better hurry and adjourn.
Okay.
Right.
The board retreat meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, Annie.
Well done.
Good night.
Good night, Andy.
Thanks for,
Okay, bye.
thanks for joining us.